There's an Assembly Finance Committee to order for February 7th, 2024. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have all Assembly members present in chambers besides Assemblymember Wahal Gadak and Assemblymember Wall, who are present on Zoom, and Assemblymember Hughes Scandies is absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Approval of minutes. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the January 10th, 2024 minutes, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Any objection to the, seeing that the minutes for January 10th are approved. I'm just making sure everybody can hear me okay with the mask on. So I'm on the very, very tail, the last day of my COVID set. So I was going to be by all my esteemed colleagues. I figured I'd wear a mask, but tomorrow I'll skip freely. Agenda topics. Who's going to start with the audit extension? Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At our last Assembly Finance Committee, we presented a memo recommending that we extend our contract with LG Rayfield to do the financial statement compilation for Bartlett Hospital, for the school district, and then the larger CBJ audit. During that discussion, it was requested that we reach out to the Bartlett board to ensure that they were aware and okay with that decision. I did speak with the president of the Bartlett board, as well as their chief financial officer and their CEO, and they are all okay for the year. Looking forward to bringing that conversation back for a true RFP in the fall. And there was no action. The only action that was required was if you wanted to stop it and do an RFP now. Otherwise, staff is going to work forward on an extension for 1 year.
Okay, do you need a formal motion for that, or
No, we don't.
any objection for us to continue the audit extension? Mr. Bryson?
I don't have an objection, but I had a question.
Sure.
So we're extending the audit with the LG Rayfield. How does the situation that we're about to discuss with the school board fit into, the audit information? As we're moving forward, is it going to change how they either view things, or are they going to look for different things? We just had like a major thing come up. So how does the audit fit in, and will it prevent something like this moving forward, or is it going to give us better information?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bryson. We have many audits, but I'll let Ms. Flick talk to that about that.
Thank you. Assemblymember Bryson, the auditors will continue to look for the things that they always do in audit. When they're looking at the data, they're pulling transactional data, they're testing, they're making sure that there are policies. They have brought forward concerns in the past, and they will continue to bring forward concerns as they continue to see them and as they see them.
But this particular audit extension is just for BRH, correct?
This particular audit extension is for the full package that they are doing, which is Bartlett's financial statement preparation, the school district's financial statement preparation, and then CBJ's audit, which includes an audit of the school district and Bartlett, as well as all the normal CBJ departments.
All right, thank you. Did that answer your question, Mr. Bryson? Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, so it looks like we're going to extend that audit. Ms. Wendell?
I would like to note for the record that Assemblymember Hughes Scandies has just joined us on Zoom.
All right, thank you. And somewhere there's noise. Could we get rid of the bells and whistles and everything else that's happening? Thank you. All right, next we have fund balance discussion. Ms. Kester, is that you, or is that Ms. Flick again?
I'll go ahead and take that one, Madam Mayor. So on page 8 of your packet, you've got a memo that really is a follow-up from the retreat, where we started the discussion of what to spend our debt capacity and our fund balance on. The first thing I think I'd like you to do, and I apologize to those of you who save trees and use an electronic packet, but if you could take out your pen, and there's a question here on the second paragraph that says, how much unrestricted general fund balance do we have? And it says 22 million, but it's misleading because we have, as presented in the December retreat, so it's not a snapshot of what we have today, keeping in mind that fund balance is just a snapshot in time. We have $31 million as of that December retreat when we pulled those numbers in unrestricted fund balance. The number 22 comes from a recommendation on what we should reserve, that we should reserve $9 million of fund balance for cash flow cushion and other things. So I just want to be very, not misleading with that. So really, as we look at, as the deputy manager and I build the budget, any guidance that this body can give us on how to spend fund balance and what you would like to see for bonded projects moving forward will help us as we plan. Understanding that you're not going to be making a firm decision or directing us to introduce an ordinance today, but it will also help you in the context of your next discussion about JSD requests. So you'll see in this memo, I talk about just being aware of some of the near-term fund balance expenditures that I see, Title 49 rewrite that we talked about, an endless amount of water and wastewater infrastructure projects. One thing that's not on here, but that really should be in our minds as well, is as we move through the budget, the operating budget, we are trying to draw out any one-time expenditures to relieve pressure on the operating budget. And so, we will be coming to you with some number that's like, okay, we could fund all of these things, let's say, $2 million. I don't know what that number is yet because we're meeting every day with different departments. So that's fund balance. And then it also talks about our debt capacity. At the retreat, there was conversation on debt capacity. I think the retreat number we used was 75 million. We used 70 million in this memo. It's again, not an exact science. It's a moving target recommendation that the finance director makes based on interest rates and a whole host of other things. So that's a little bit of an overview. You'll see on the next page is a list that, again, staff came up with and kind of tried to separate it into the very near-term projects, the midterm projects, and the things that we really need to keep in mind. So the near-term projects are things that we believe need to be funded this year, and the largest among them is public safety communications infrastructure. That is for our radio system for our first responders, CCFR, JPD, but also transit uses that radio system, and it is just mission critical to have that replaced. It's aging, it's failing. We have pockets where our officers cannot communicate with each other. And then going down that list are things that I've already mentioned. Midterm are things, also to keep in mind as we move forward. And then just bigger picture, there's really no end to quality projects that CBJ could spend fund balance on or debt capacity on, and chief among them is renovation of schools, because no matter what the school district ends up doing at the end of the day, there will need to be major capital investments in schools. So I am happy to pause there and answer any questions.
Who has questions? Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had set aside, I believe, $16.5 million for City Hall. Is that part of the 31 million unrestricted, or is that somewhere else?
That is not part of the 31 million, although there is a note on the memo that says there will be expenditures for City Hall renovations and tenant improvements. I mean, I threw $6 million at that number, but it's really going to matter if so many things are going to matter on that. So that number has not been rolled into fund balance because it sits in a dedicated CIP.
Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a quick question on the public safety communication item. We've been slotting bits and pieces of money towards that, and with the CDS money, I thought some piece of that had to do with encryption, and I was just hoping you could speak a little bit more about this, Ms. Kester, because I thought part of that was, yes, it's replacing, or it's overdue, but that's the first time I've heard the project described as what we have is failing and it's not going to work anymore versus we need to improve upon this and, you know, add other features to it.
So I'm going to address the first part of your question as I invite JPD up to talk about more project details. So thank you guys for being here. If you want to come sit next to me.
Or actually, if they both want to come, we have a table that they can
There you
share
go.
mic.
So the first part of your question is, have we been squirreling away funds for this? And we have $500,000 that's been appropriated, $2 million in congressionally directed spending that is pending and really is all up in the air with the continuing resolutions on the federal level. And then we have 2 million scheduled for fiscal year 26 in the 1%. So that's a total project cost of $21.5 million.
And then we'll go for the next part of the question to our lovely guests. You have to hit the button to turn to green, and please introduce yourself, Ms. Calwara.
Erin Kalwara, I'm the Public Safety Manager, and part of my position is to support the radio system that supports the police department, fire department responders. Our system is very old. It's very outdated. It has components that we cannot replace anymore. When they go out, we have to source them from places like eBay. So it's not just moving forward and being digital and providing the additional ability to do encryption. It's about replacing the equipment that we have that is aged and just not working. At any moment, it could stop working, basically. It was scheduled to be replaced over 5 years ago, and we've been working on funding since. At the time, we were working on doing small bits and pieces, components of it here and there. We got a radio study that was performed in 2020, and the consultant provided us with a lot of information that pointed us towards joining the Alaska Land Mobile Radio System. In order to do that, we do have to do some substantial upgrades to our system and to our infrastructure. So it's not simply moving to encryption, it is providing subscriber units to our people operating in the field so that they can hear each other when they're inside burning structures, so that officers can hear each other when they're on police calls, and so that different personnel throughout the city can hear each other on things like flood events or anything like that. It will provide more interoperable communication citywide.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Wall and then Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question wasn't about the communication system. So if that's where our focus is right now, I can hold my question.
And Mr. Smith.
Thanks. Are there not are there grants for this type of system? I mean, I feel like at one point we had, maybe that was just hopeful, wishful thinking. So maybe this is just the price tag.
Who wants to do that one?
I'll just let you know that I have certainly been on the lookout for grants, and the congressionally directed spending is a form of grant. And I know that Ms. Clara also has been, so if you want to add context to that.
Yes, we have received several Homeland Security grants. We just replaced all the dispatch radio consoles in the comm center and the backroom equipment with a Homeland Security grant, so that was great. We have provided some interconnectivity with our radio system with a microwave, which is backhaul for our radio, down at the fire department, Station 1 downtown. So there are bits and pieces that we have been able to get smaller grants. There just aren't any grants that are sizable enough to complete the whole project. And doing it piecemeal is not really very cost effective, and it won't provide the best service that we can to our responders or to the community.
Thank you. I'm gonna jump in here and then we'll go to Mr. Bryson. We talked about equipment, but you're talking about the big equipment like the repeaters and the lines between the repeaters and that. This is not the little handheld walkie-talkies. That's correct. Okay. And
It's everything. So it's, Chief, sorry, Mayor. We've known each other a long time. It's everything from those subscriber units that they would carry on their hip or have in their vehicle responding to calls, to the towers, to the radio attached to the tower that connects back to the mothership at JPD that provides all the communications going back and forth. And it's also also microwave. So we've identified a few points of significant failure. One of those is our Saddle Mountain site. It's a high site on Douglas Island, and we lost commercial power to it for 4 months. And during that time, we had very, very poor radio communications. And we now know that we have to provide some alternate paths for those communications if we expect our responders to always receive their calls for service. We were dispatching the fire department by cell phones for a period of time.
Perfect, just what we need. And will this get rid of the shadow on Thunder Mountain?
It will, yes, it will prevent the shadow of Thunder Mountain
Thank you.
interfering so much.
Perfect. Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's a perfect segue into my question. As encryption was one of the benefits of upgrading the system, if you could remind me, it also impacted our ability to communicate with the state troopers, and it also impacted our ability to communicate with CCFR. How would that change as we made this improvement?
It would improve. So going digital, joining the Alaska Land Mobile Radio Station, we can communicate with folks in Haines, in Anchorage, anywhere statewide once we join the system, and our responders have the radios that allow them to do that. So it would be helpful. We've had many multi-agency responses where we went to Hoonah to assess them with some police calls. The fire department has been to Haines for mudslides, and we've done a lot of things, and the communication has never been great. So when we're on this system, we'll be able to take our own radios, we'll have shared channels, we'll be able to communicate, we'll be much more effective with those kinds of things.
Okay, any more questions in regards to the public safety communication infrastructure? Seeing none, Ms. Calwera, would you introduce the young gentleman next to you, please?
Yes, I will. This is Chief Derek Voss, the Chief of Police at JPD, effective last Thursday.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here, and I apologize for missing your swearing in, but I was a little under the weather, so
Not a problem at all. Thank you.
welcome. All right, we will move down. Any questions on anything else? We'll go to Ms. Wall because she's been patient. We're done with you guys, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question was about the $9 million suggested floor. Certainly understand kind of a desire to have cushion and funds available for opportunities. I like that. I will, cash flow was something that caught my eye, and maybe this has been here before, but I'd never really picked up on it. Like, do we actually have cash flow issues that requires multi-million dollars of that we have to keep in fund balance, or in what scenario are we worried about cash flow?
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Ms. Flick is jumping all over this, so she has an answer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Assemblymember Wall, the $9 million was actually a discussion and a floor that was established prior to my becoming the finance director with Mr. Rogers and Mr. Barr and Mr. Watt having really worked on that conversation. And it's less about cash flow. No, we'll put it out that we do not have cash flow issues at all. It's more about providing the assembly the opportunity to take advantage of those one-time events and those opportunities that come along throughout the year, rather than planning a budget that takes your unrestricted fund balance to zero, providing some cushion in there for the things that may happen, whether it's Snowmageddon and that's really bad and we need to dig into that for additional snow removal, or an opportunity that's presented to the assembly that you really want to get behind and fund. And so there's no magic or secret sauce to the 9 million. It was a number that felt appropriate for the kinds of projects that may be coming along.
Okay, Ms. Wall's nodding her head. Ms. Hughes Candies, I think you had a hand up at one time. You took your hand back down. Okay, Ms. Hale.
I think I'm good, thanks. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Ms. Flick, I know you weren't here at the time, but I think there was also conversation about a certain amount in reserve for handling a certain period of months, number of months of like 3 months or something like, I can't remember what it was, but having that, making sure we had that on hand. And we are, also have the reserve budget, restricted budget reserve too. Thanks.
Do you want to address that, Ms. Flick?
Certainly. Ms. Hale, there is a restricted budget reserve that the Assembly put into place per resolution. And the intention of that is to provide 2 to 3 months of buffer for operating the city if there were a dramatic pandemic, for instance, or depending on your revenue streams, you know, the Great Recession of 2008 decimated a lot of cities and counties. And so that restricted budget reserve does have $19 million in it, and that's representative of the 2 to 3 months that's recommended as best practice. It is underfunded by $1 million, decisions that were made in last year's budget cycle. So you'll hear often through this conversation, and it may actually be on Ms. Kester's list, that we need to put another $1 million in our budget reserve to make it whole.
Thank you for clarifying that.
All right, questions on anything else? Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, Ms. Cute.
No problem. You know, at the retreat, we discussed and all got behind Title 49 rewrite. I guess my question is that money that, I mean, do we need to like spend the 3 million this year, or is it a fate? I mean, anyway, what is the kind of flight path for that type of project? I guess maybe, do we need to put down 3 million on that right now, or can we do some and then do some more later or something?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Kester.
Director Lawhorn presented a memo in your January 29th Committee of the Whole packet, which we did not have a chance to review because it was quite a meaty meeting. But in there, she outlines a 3-year plan. And I can't recall on the top of my head the expenditures associated with each year, but they are definitely larger in the second and third year.
Ms. Flick.
And if I may add to that, Mr. Smith, if we pursue a contract with a consultant or a firm to help us with that, we should have that money appropriated in full before we engage in a long-term contract with someone.
Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to jump back to the restricted budget reserve and characterize Ms. Flick, I believe, said we underfunded that last year, so it's $1 million to make it whole if that's something we want to move over there. We also talked about last year the idea of inflationary pressure on that, and so I just want to make sure I'm on the right page. That is what we're referring to really with this 1 million move, would be to keep that in line with our actual expenses, right?
Thank you, Ms. Hughes-Candies. Ms. Flick.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, that is correct. We do, the $1 million would make us whole, and we do look at the prior year's expenditures and revenues to help make that decision of what that restricted budget reserve number should be. So it does take into account our true experience year over year.
Okay, I see a thumbs up. So any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, anybody want to just throw some comments out there? We're not looking for motions to tie us into anything, just where we are thought-wise, I guess. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for, but I know we're going to get to the JSD loan in the next topic, but I would prefer that to come out of the restricted budget reserve because there will be a payback plan and it is an emergency rather than our fund balance. Thank you.
Sure, that's a thought, but we will get to that at the next one because we'll have to determine a fund source where that's coming from. So why don't we save that particular discussion for our next topic? Mr. Smith, I think I saw you. And then we have Ms. Wall and then Ms. Hughes-Candies. Mr. Kelly, was that okay, well, we have 3 people in front of you. You can decide then. Mr. Bryson, okay.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I guess, as I'm looking down this list, one thing I'm considering, of course, is, we can geo bond for some of these things, but I believe it's, it's the Alaska Constitution that like binds us to what we can do. Doesn't it have to be for capital improvements? So, things like the public safety communications infrastructure seems like a good option. Could we bond as a match for a capital grant? Or for like, for the grant, the match? Can we bond for that?
So I'll just answer that, and then Ms. Flick may have more opinion. So absolutely. In fact, when we go to build a $300 million bridge, we're going to have to come up with a match. And the only way I see us doing that is asking the voters for a bond. The 1 million for our current grant, I think would be difficult just because we've already secured that grant. Wheels are already turning on that project. Not that you couldn't, but from a timing perspective, I think that needs to be in the queue before the voters would approve that.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I was blending a question with a comment, but it seems wastewater and water systems seems like there's some significant needs that might be good for a geo bond as well as the radios and maybe match. Maybe that's kind of where I'm thinking. We have 20, we could and still keep within kind of a, trying to keep 9 million in reserve, but I'm not necessarily sure that we should do all of that right now. I think, we need to see what's kind of going on. So I don't know if I'd be in full support of trying to find $22 million to spend of fund balance, but see what people say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We have Ms. Wall, Ms. Hughes Scandy, Mr. Bryson, and Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Had a few similar thoughts as Mr. Smith. I know some of this conversation will evolve over time. It's super helpful. I appreciate staff putting together this list as we go through the budget process, but I do think that identifying the projects we want to bond for early is going to be important. And I definitely supportive of public safety infrastructure. I think 17 million, my gut tells me that's a lot of money to ask of the voters. And so maybe that's a project that we split up between general fund and bonds. Just because, I think it's hard for people to understand that something like that costs that large amount of money. And I also thought that in addition, something to help with whether it's fog removal or wastewater projects, bonding for that might be a good option. So I'd be supportive of two smaller projects to put before the voters.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Ms. Hughes Scandy.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Well, it's music to my ears. I'm gonna join the chorus. One thing I wanted to say in identifying what else might be a viable candidate for bonding, I think our utility projects are a pretty strong candidate. Again, be it fog or something else, but it is, I think looking backwards at the last few bonds and just thinking of feedback from the public, I think that utilities are one of those things where it makes a lot of sense in terms of what funding sources we have available and what the need is. So I'd be a strong proponent of that for a potential bond candidate. And then agree with Ms. Wall. I'm not sure that's the right number for the public safety, but I agree that's also a strong choice. And happy to learn more about the project because I think the way it's been characterized, and maybe that's just my poor interpretation of it, but I don't think it's as clear to, anyone who's following the assembly, which we all know hordes of, not everybody is probably following this process very closely for years, but if it's at the sort of dire state where we're buying things on eBay, I see that as another good candidate. And then appreciated learning the information about the Title 49 rewrite. This is really helpful as far as framing, so I appreciate staff doing this. I will say, I think we talked about a lot of ambitious plans at the retreat in terms of housing. So I think there's also potential for potentially other one-time spending that is for housing. And I know we have our affordable housing fund, but I think if we're really seeking to do quite a lot, that there might be something else that goes on here as a one-time expenditure that's in the realm of housing. I think that was all. And I'm also like Ms. Wall, interested in exploring what the right funding source is for a potential loan. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree. I think that the direction that we're going, a couple of small bondings, I'm going to be able to support that. I'm sure we'll have a discussion, come up with a really good, appropriate package that the voters will approve of. I think my question, my statement is going to lean on the restricted budget reserve. As you just mentioned, we have 9 million as the floor of our cash operating expenses, so that we have operating capital. I thought that we had a code that said that our restricted budget reserve had to equal 2 months of operating expenses. Is it a code, or is that just the rule of thumb?
I think it's a resolution.
Would that be considered a rule, Madam Mayor? So that's the rule, 2 months?
Well, it's a recommendation of a rule. How about that? A guide.
It's not a binding resolution? No, okay.
So typically, the restricted budget reserve, and Ms. Flick can do this, it typically has to be kind of a crisis, and there has to be a plan to pay it back.
Pay it back. Okay, thank you. So that was the same understanding I had. I knew we were about 2 months. As Ms. Flick showed, that we are about $1 million short because our city budget with inflation does continue to grow. Keeping money in the restricted budget reserve reduces that $9 million need. So if we have a restricted budget reserve that's a little bit above 2 months operating capital, then you have less pressure on your floor of your operating capital. Because you're keeping the money in a little bit more of a solid state, like a CD. That also helps with our credit rating because it shows that we're in a positive cash position. And I do believe that Juneau has a AA+ rating. And it can't be because, well, it's got to be because we've been very careful with our money. Funding the restricted budget reserve to the 1 million, and maybe even forward thinking a year or two, because we know that it's, whenever we fund it, the next year it's already going to be behind a little bit. So keeping our restricted budget reserve at a full healthy level just makes the whole rest of everything that we do a little bit safer. So I would, if we were going to do something for restricted budget reserve, that would be my recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. Keeping in mind this restricted budget reserve 1 million is not necessarily that it's in the hole. That is the amount that we had to use last year to balance our budget. So they're just bringing it back before us because we didn't put it in last year, because we were planning on putting that back in. Ms. Adkins, oh, sorry, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. And my comment was going to be related to Mr. Bryson's, but before I do, I think I'd like to, if I could ask Ms. Flick, how much do we currently have in our restricted budget reserve?
Ms. Flick.
Through the chair, Mr. Kelly, we have $19 million in our restricted budget reserve. And again, it's a backward-looking number, so we look at our last audited financials, so it's based on FY22 at this point, and we look at 2 months worth of our capital. Best practice is 2 to 3 months, so we're right in the best practice.
Follow up, Mr. Kelly?
No follow-up questions, but I'll go ahead and proceed with my comment. I think especially if we are considering possibly loaning the school district out of the restricted budget reserve, that it might be the responsible thing to go ahead and make that fully funded for this year. Or with.
Okay, again, appreciate the comment, but again, it's all fully funded, 2 to 3 years. This $1 million is just because we used $1 million last year that we were supposed to put in the restricted budget reserve. We took that out and putting it in to balance our budget, so remember that. So restricted budget reserve is healthy. Don't want anybody to get that mistaken there. So I'm looking at Ms. Atkinson or Wahal Gadok before I make a comment. I hope you guys seem to agree. So I agree with pretty much what everybody said. I can't emphasize the importance of the public safety communication infrastructure. And I specifically asked about Thunder Mountain. Myself and my engineer at the time had to run a code, which is someone not breathing, no pulse by ourselves. That's just 2 people for probably 10 to 15 minutes because we couldn't get through to anybody on a radio. And that was not something that I would care to have anybody repeat, and it just needs to be done. I mean, it was old when I left, and I have been retired now 12 years, and it was old then. They were pretty much using tinfoil from bubblegum wrappers and wire then, so I have no idea what they're holding it together with right now. So I would love to do part of that as a bond, and I think Ms. Wall said to split it, but that's it's in a crisis right now, so I think we need to invest part of our balance also for that. The only other thing I would point out is the Title 49 rewrite. Not only did that get a thumbs up at our retreat, everybody did a 5 fingers up. So, in fact, I even asked Ms. Kester, why it was even here, because I thought we covered it in the retreat. We agreed to do it. We knew it had a cost. I think that should have been part of the retreat. And I also agree that the fog removal and or a few other utility projects that are very well needed should probably go for a bond. So that's my comments. Ms. Hale.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I had a couple comments that I wanted to make. One, as we spoke earlier, the thing about bonding for utilities and the fog removal is that then overall lowers utility bills, or at least they don't increase as much because it would be bonded and everybody would be paying for those. And so I think that particularly helps those with lower incomes because those utility bill increases hurt those people the most. I also wanted to just indicate that I appreciate Ms. Huskandi's comments about housing. And kind of along those lines, in the past, sometimes we've been cautious to spend our budget reserve, and I just want to encourage us to realize that we've got a restricted budget reserve, there's an emergency, and so this money is money that we should spend to keep our city functioning well. So, thank you.
So, and then we do have a housing item on here, although it doesn't have money, and that's the Telephone Hill redevelopment. So that could also be a potential housing, since I think most people want us to move forward on that. So, Ms. Kester, do you have enough direction tonight? I don't think we want to get too far in the nitty gritties of these things because we have a long budget season ahead of us, but you have enough for tonight, or do you need us to discuss this more?
No, thank you. I appreciate, I'm hearing yes to a bond proposition this year, critical infrastructure, water, wastewater, maybe some portion of radio infrastructure.
Okay, and potentially, as Mr. Smith said, some of our match. I see nods around, okay. Sorry, people on the Zoom, I just see nods around the table. Okay, with that, any further comment on this before we move to the next item? I don't see anything. Do we want to take a quick break? Because I imagine the next one might be long. Okay, moving on. School district discussion. Ms. Kester, are we going to you for that?
Happy to kick this off.
And
So-
everybody, it's in your supplemental.
You have what I hate to do, which is a 5-page memo in your packet, but I really only consider 4 pages long because the last page is an end note. And I apologize that people have only had about half of the day to go over this, but we are all moving quickly on this topic. I'm going to briefly go over my memo because we haven't had days to chew on it, and then
Ms. Kester, can I pause you? If anybody wants to see it, it's in the back of the room too, for anybody that wants to look at it.
and then hopefully work through the recommendations at the end of the memo, which is the direction that I need from the assembly to move forward. So just to let you know where I need to be, where staff needs to be at the end of this meeting, hopefully, is direction from the assembly on fiscal year 2024 cash assistance to the school district, 2025 cash assistance for the school district, and the outline of a loan. And those three things will then be brought back to you as separate ordinances at the special meeting that we're holding on the 26th of February for the purposes of introducing those ordinances. So that's where we're going today. I do want to give a lot of credit to my team and staff, Ms. Flick and Robert Barr. You will see this memo is from the three of us because we all three put our heads together on it. So as you know, it helps to have a great team. So just to briefly summarize the January 30th joint meeting with the school district, you heard from the manager's office, recommendation to cover a loan, a 5-year loan, 3 to 5 year, a 5-year loan, with conditions of some financial awareness, some sharing of staff, and the condition of this Juneau School District having a plan by 2026 to pay that back. We talked about facility maintenance being provided by CBJ and talked about how that would be a plan that would have to be worked out in the future, probably for fiscal year 27, full implementation in 27. And we talked about community schools. The formal request that you have in your packet, that's also a supplemental item, is laid out on the table below, and it is for 75% of facility maintenance, 66% of utility costs, so that is the utilities of the schools, from 3 p.m. to 8 a.m. or when they're not in use for school, property insurance, and 75% of property insurance and 10% of operations and custodial. So that is the proposal that the school board has put before you today. That proposal looks like $4 million in direct spend for 24 and 25 by CBJ. I'm going to move on to talk about the manager's office proposal in more detail, and that's on the next page of your packet. So if you'll see the chart at the top of this packet, is what the manager's office is proposing for this fiscal assistance. The first item would be that we, CBJ, pay for the fiscal year 2024 facilities maintenance costs at JSD. That's $1.6 million. That demonstrates our intent to eventually take on maintenance of our facilities. It also has a loan for $6.3 million. That's the remainder of the deficit for fiscal year 24. You will see in fiscal year 25, we also recommend paying that $1.6 million for facility maintenance, understanding that will take some time for any type of transitioning, and then we have salary for a finance staff person in there. One thing that the school district proposal was silent on was beyond 2025, and I appreciate that they, have a decision-making process to go through, and it's been a lot to get to 2025. But beyond 2025, manager's recommendation would be to take on building facility maintenance, increase the investment that we make in maintaining our schools, and that would relieve the Juneau School District budget of $1.6 million, not to the end of days, but it would certainly, for the foreseeable future, relieve them of that. Also in beyond, JSD would begin paying the repayment of the loan, and that would be 3 years of equal payments of $2.63 million at 0%. Some of the expectations that the manager's office recommends attaching to this proposal would be transitioning the maintenance supervisor to CBJ, so we can start working on some continuity there and really understanding those facilities, access to all the kind of facility maintenance data, contracts, and files in order to understand the state of our facilities, transitioning of community schools. You know, there's a conversation that really needs to be fleshed out. The Assembly's talked about that for a while. That is something that I think would need to happen. That conversation obviously needs to continue. Of course, when, as conditioned, an additional expectation, of course, which Deed will share, is a structurally balanced budget for fiscal year 2026 and beyond, and a plan to repay that loan. So that is a huge mouthful, and certainly if you're just following it verbally, you're probably not following along very well. But Mayor, do you want me to pause and give the body an opportunity?
Yes, we
to
do.
ask questions?
Thank
Okay.
you. All right, we already have questions from Ms. Hale, Mr. Smith, and then Ms. Kelly, Ms. Atkins. So we'll just go right down the line.
Right on. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not quite understanding the math in that table on the top of page 2 of the supplemental. You have a loan for 6.3 million, and then you say JSD begins repayment of loan 2.63 million annually for 3 years. But 2.63 times 3 is 7.89 million, but the loan shown there is 6.3 million.
Ms. Kester.
Yeah, my apologies. I was working with different numbers and different assumptions through the drafting this memo. So you are correct that
It would be 2.1.
Yeah, I should not have put a number, because when you put numbers, you risk getting things wrong.
Sorry, thank you very much.
Okay, so just to be clear, FY 2026 repayment should be 2.1 million. Is that correct? They're conferring. Okay, Ms. Flick probably heard me, but I'll say it again. So just to confirm, FY 2026, under the loan, JSD begins repayment of loan, so it should be 2.1 million annually for 3 years then? Is that correct? Ms. Flick?
Madam Mayor, yes, if, again, the structure of the loan is up to the Assembly, but if it's a straight line payment, 6.3 million divided by 3 would get you to the 2.1 million a year.
Okay, thank you. Now, on down the line, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess I'm curious why we need to decide on the FY '24 shared services support outside of the normal FY '25 budget process. And I get it, it's a lot going on. I guess I'm just like, do we even know the size of their deficit or their structural deficit in FY '25? I imagine it's bad. So I get that, but I'm also like, I'm not totally understanding why the need to do it outside of the process, especially when we may not have the full picture.
Ms. Kester.
Yes, so the school district has requested the funding for fiscal year 2024, so the year that we're in right now, as a mechanism to reduce the amount that they will have to borrow. Because the amount that they will have to borrow, of course, results in deeper cuts in subsequent years to meet that match. So the reason for discussing it now is that it's part of the fiscal plan that the school district is working on to achieve fiscal stability.
So in other words, Deed has told them they have to pay this much back, and if we don't do FY '24 and '25, they'll just be more of a loan. Is that correct? Ms. Flick?
I think you're close, Madam Mayor. So, as I understand, FY '24's request is twofold. It's addressing prior year deficits, and it's addressing the deficit in the current year. Part of reducing that loan amount is, you can look at this one of the two ways. As presented in the school district's memo, which is also in your supplemental packet, reducing their expenditures by sharing the cost with CBJ. You could also look at that as them having the full expenditures and gaining a revenue source by the payment from CBJ. Either way, The idea being that their revenues would end up equaling their expenditures with the offsetting shared services that were proposed in the memo from the school. The reason why we need to look at 25 is the assumptions made, if they can balance that in 24 and replicate that for 25, they may still have to do some cost cutting, but they're starting out much closer with their revenue and their expenditures if we can replicate the 24 cost sharing into 25.
Follow-up question, Mr. Smith, you're still looking confused.
I hear and I understand what you're saying about FY '24, and I'm not just trying to, I guess I'm not trying to kick the can down the road. I'm just kind of wondering, it seems like we have been people have been moving very, very quickly just due to the time constraints and the kind of uniqueness of the situation. I guess I still don't understand why we don't make FY '25 decisions during the FY '25 budget process when we will have had more time. And I mean, again, does someone actually know, or can they tell me today what the structural FY '25 budget, the structural deficit of the school district is for FY '25? Because I have not heard that yet. Again, I know it's bad, but.
Well, let me answer your question about why to make a decision today. The school district has to submit a budget to Deed by March 15th, their 25 budget. So in order to do that, they need to know what CBJ is going to do. Could you just borrow could you just give them a loan for $7.9 million? That would be like the minimum amount you would have to do so that we're not, deficit spending.
Very good. You answered it with the submit to Deed by March.
Yeah, so we're just trying to set them up the best we can before we yank away the training
I
wheels.
just wanted to have the best numbers and enough time.
No, I like that you're looking forward, Mr. Smith. It always makes me happy. We have Mr. Kelly, Ms. Atkinson, Ms. Wall, and then Ms. Hale.
Yep. No, not me.
Oh, you were pointing to him. Okay, you're replacing Mrs. Hale, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I have tons of questions, but I'll start with just one.
You just get one at a time.
Thank you. My first question has to do with the maintenance supervisor rolling over to JPD. How will that work? Will that be a city employee supervising JSD? Like, will he still continue to supervise JSD employees?
Who's taking that? Ms. Kester.
It might not come as a surprise to you that I have not had the time, attention to flesh out anything in that level of detail. So luckily we have time on this particular topic, but I'm sorry, I cannot answer those questions. I've been working on trying to get a higher level presentation to you.
I absolutely understand. Thank you.
All right. So a follow-up would be a question related. Do you have a follow-up? Another question means you have to wait. Okay. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you. I'm just looking at some of these costs that we are thinking about taking over some of, in particular like property insurance and utilities. And I would love to get very glib with the statute here and be like, well, if we're not operating a school at this time, we can definitely do this. But the Alaska Admin Code does say that local contribution means money appropriated to a district school operating fund by the city or borough. And I understand that there have been some preliminary conversations with Deed about this, but have we said to them, can we take over property insurance? And they've been like, yeah, sure. Or is it more of a like, we're thinking about taking over some expenses that might be a little, and we haven't given specifics? Because I would really hate for us to get far in this process and have the rug yanked out from under us. So I guess, how specific have the consultations with Deed been?
Excellent question from your perspective, Ms. Atkinson, but I know Ms. Kester has an answer for you.
I think those are very astute observations, and I share some of your concerns. And I believe that funding utilities, property insurance, and custodial has some risk to it, and you've articulated that risk. This is why the manager's office has not included funding those in our recommendation. However, we do, pages 3 and 4 do talk about, if the assembly wants to go beyond the manager's recommendations, this is what we would recommend. I have not had those conversations with Deed. Staff has had conversations with Deed about facility maintenance. Conversations and agreements are very different things. So again, all of this has some risk. I do know that Attorney Palmer has had some of those conversations and Superintendent Hauser. So they have worked more directly with me on that topic.
All right, does that satisfy your, okay? Next we have Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a different question, but a follow-up to Ms. Atkinson's question. I wouldn't mind hearing that answered from Mr. Palmer since he was in the room for that conversation about kind of the level of specificity, if he's available.
He's coming up. Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Ms. Wall. Two threads of concepts here. One, Superintendent Hauser and I definitely had a conversation with Deed. I would definitely call it preliminary. There's not a agreement that's been inked on it yet. I think it's hopeful that we can get to something. Maybe it's just because it's a 5-year payback plan that they're willing to work with us, or maybe there's some pushing on the actual law that could happen. The second concept, and I am definitely sensitive to Member Atkinson's concerns. I'm gonna take a deep breath on this one. There's two sets of laws that might govern this. There's statutes on this and there's regulations, and I will say Deed's regulations are inconsistent with statute. Now, what does that mean? I don't know yet, because there's not a court case that identifies that distinction between the two or the difference between the two. Without waiving any arguments on that, if we just focus on the Deed regulation, the regulation does allow the municipality to provide things like insurance, utilities, energy, maintenance of facilities. However, it has to be at fair market value, and if it's related to education, it has to be accounted for in the operating budget. The implication behind that rule of the regulation means that if the utilities, insurance, energy, maintenance is unrelated to education, outside of the operating fund, then it's a special revenue issue and there's no cap. So that's why I think you have the presentation by both staff, by the manager and the superintendent, identifying percentages and different categories of energy, insurance, utilities, and maintenance and operations to get into that ballpark of what's fair market value for the education portion versus not education portion. And then you obviously have discretion as the assembly to determine, even if that's in the ballpark of legal, what are you comfortable spending?
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. And Ms. Kester, I'm assuming that's why you have everything zero, is it's pretty gray. Is that correct? Okay, thumbs up on that one. Okay, Ms. Wall, did you have another question? Because that was just a follow-up.
Yeah, hopefully this one will be quick. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just want to thank both the school board and JSD staff, as well as our staff, for putting together all this information very quickly. And so there's a lot here. I don't know how much, all of it I've observed yet, but one thing I picked up from my quick read is, as far as building, Ms. Kester, your recommendation when we met with the school board was, eventual taking over of facilities maintenance by CBJ. My understanding of this memo says that the only things we would be taking over in FY25 under your recommendation would be maintenance supervisor that's not under the just bargaining agreement, and we would have access to data, contracts, and files. Is that correct? That those are the only kind of steps towards full control of building maintenance that's in this recommendation?
Ms. Kester.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. Next we have Mr. Bryson and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I promise I have a question at the end of this. Okay, so I'm going to start this off with, we get the behavior that we reward, and that's what we're doing right now. We have funded to the cap every single year that I've been on the assembly. And then we've gotten pressure to fund above and beyond the cap. And they struggled to maintain the budget. They blew past this one. So now, even when we give them a loan to fix this, it's going to make their future budget that much harder to deal with because they got a $2 million deficit going to every budgets or going into every year. How do we respond when we set this up and we get a 3-year payment plan and then next year, the year down the road, they've broken their budget or gone past it? After we've run into this, after we've funded them to the max and we're in this predicament, and again, we're getting pressure, just fund us in other ways, go around the statutes to get us funding. What do we do when the next time that they're not able to meet their financial obligations after we do this loan?
Okay, I'm going to stop you at that.
Thank you, that's the question.
Ms. Flick, I'm going to go to you or Mr. Palmer. If they mess up on repayment of their loan, what happens then? Mr. Palmer wants that one. You guys are in trouble. The attorney wants to answer that question.
Yeah, I don't know if I want it, but I will definitely answer it for you. So the Assembly has unique powers through the annual budget process. So if, regardless of the current situation, the Assembly always has the power of appropriation, and you can decide how much you want to appropriate up to the cap and then out to non-instructional things to the special revenue fund. So different than the cap. If for some reason the loan is not satisfied under any terms that the Assembly agrees to with the school board, you have the power through that appropriation process to change some of those appropriations and potentially even direct payments to the loan.
So in a nutshell, we hold the purse. If they don't pay us back, we don't give them everything they want from the purse. Is that?
That is, I'm just speaking legally. I'm not saying politically that's the right decision. I'm just
Yeah.
saying those are the tools you have.
Okay, but legally, we have to make them pay back a loan.
Legally, the loan would need to be paid back.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up, Mr. Bryson? Okay, next we have Mr. Kelly and then Ms. Hughes-Gandes and then Ms. Hale.
Thank you, and you go ahead and put me back in the queue. My next question, and actually, Ms. Atkinson largely asked my question, but I think I wanted a little bit more detail, and perhaps the Superintendent Hauser might be able to answer this one. I am interested in knowing how the school district arrived at the percentages, how they justified the percentages of what percent of the maintenance and other costs, utilities and insurance is educational and what isn't educational? How did they arrive at that? And do we think that would pass the red face test, as former member Jones might call it?
Thank you for that. Mr. Hauser, you want to come up? So the question is basically how you came up with the percentages.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, through the mayor to Member Kelly. In similar ways that I think in the memo that came from CBJ, we went through and looked at, and I'm pulling up the document that we use, and calculated the percentages very similar and looking at what is an instructional day. And so, for example, kind of looked at an overall calculation of 365 calendar days a year. 185 of those are contracted, certificated instructional staff days. And so when you look at that, 50.7% of the days are scheduled instructional days, and that's just simple division. 185 divided by 365 gives you that 50.7. So really when you look at that, there's 180 days are non-contracted, non-instructional days. And so really it came down to identifying of the instructional days, what is the instructional time? And you look at when school starts for elementary, middle school, and high school. Elementary start at 8 o'clock. high schools end at 4:15, or if it's a seventh period, it ends at 4:55. Staff going in about an hour on either end, kind of a combination. So really you can look at a 7:30 to about 5 o'clock. So in the city's calculation, it was 10 hours a day. In the calculation I worked up, it was 9.5 hours a day. And so looking at that instructional time being 9.5 hours a day. And so taking that and looking at that 9.5 hours a day over a 24-hour period, that's about 40% of the days for instructional use for free public education. Then in looking at, if 40% is for free public education, 60% is for non-instructional use. And so basing all those, going through the calculations, and I can go through and happy to share kind of how I worked out our calculation. It is very similar to how your calculus put together. Really, the final determination of the total non-instructional facility time in CBJ-owned facilities equals about 79.7%. And so taking that and looking at, kind of the usage, looking at maintenance, realizing that, 79.7% is for non-instructional time, looking at the maintenance that's taking place, also realizing that there are certain requests that will come through. Let's say we need to hang a projector in a classroom. Maintenance comes in and does a projector in the classroom. I would absolutely consider that instructional use. That is to facilitate a need that's taking place in the classroom. And so taking that percentage of 79.7 for non-instructional, knowing that there is maintenance jobs that are taking place in the facility that I would consider instructional use, that's where the determination was made of about 75% for facilities and maintenance. As far as property insurance, when we were going through and looking at the calculation for property insurance, the facilities are obviously the city's facilities, property insurance, looking at the instructional time that takes place. The desire in that respect was to be reflective of that instructional time that takes place, which again is 79.7% in our calculations. The city does own the facilities. This is just property, not liability insurance. So liability is a separate policy that we carry on our own. This is for property insurance. Again, the consideration of matching that up with maintenance still under what we considered 79.7% is that non-instructional time out of the year. For utilities, looking at 66%, and this kind of stemmed from a conversation that came up. I think the red face test was used the first time when we met last week in that joint meeting. I would come back and say you could say that utilities matched up at that 75% or that 79.7% in our calculations of what is non-instructional time. But in looking at that, kind of conversation that took place, passing the red face test, looking at kind of the days, kind of going back and saying, okay, 66% or about a third of the day is instructional, the rest is non-instructional. And so that's where you get the 66%. For operational custodial, and kind of going through and looking at the calculations for operational custodial, kind of look at there are approximately 104 weekend days in a year, or about 28%. Currently, the Juneau School District provides weekend custodial and supervisory coverage every Saturday and Sunday for JD and Thunder Mountain High School for activities, coverage, supervision, events. And there's also throughout the week coverage that takes place, as well as there's community events that use a facility that actually don't pay for rentals fees. And so I'm looking at trying to find an estimate of what that reasonable cost would be to support community activities and community events that take place in the schools outside of the instructional day. That 10% was a percentage that I thought was a fair ask, and the board agreed with that.
Has to be related to that. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Superintendent Hauser. I really appreciate that you've taken a lot of time to go in and make this formula. I think what's really going to be important is how Valid Deed eventually decides to find it. And I wanted to double check and just kind of see if you've had any opportunity to run this formula by deed. I mean, I realize you haven't put an agreement to pen yet, but have you been in touch with them about your figurings?
Not specifically about the formula, no. The only time that conversation happened was when Mr. Palmer and I had that initial meeting with them. I have talked to him about some other items, but not specifically about the formula.
All right, next we have Ms. Hughes Candies, then Ms. Hale, then Ms. Atkinson, then Mr. Bryson. And remember, we still have only partway through the memo, so Ms. Kester is waiting anxiously to continue her memo. So Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yep. Compliments the staff, very creative, quick work. Appreciate how you did it. So I'm gonna leave 24 aside because the memo has recommendations, which I appreciate, as well as if you wanted to do more section or a choose your own adventure section is how I'm gonna interpret it. As far as 25, I just want to be clear because that's what the school district needs really quick so they can build that budget, knowing what we're gonna do. Is it correct to say the recommendation would be that we would be communicating to the school board in 25 that we are gonna fund to the cap? We're also gonna do the historical, which has been about 2.3 million, let's say, above the cap, which I'm sure Deed would hate me using those words. And we're going to reduce the budget expenses to them by 1.6 million. Is that correct? That's the recommendation for 25 only?
Ms. Kester.
You have a correct summary of 2025. The 1.65 would be a cash payment to the school district.
Right. Right. We're just making it, it's that much less in cuts that they would have to deal with. Okay. All right. Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm clear on all these.
Okay, then we have Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is easy. We have the FY24 facility maintenance at 1.65 million and the FY25 at 6.5 million. So is the proposal that we would pay the full facility maintenance costs for FY24, even though most of those have been incurred?
Ms. Kester.
You are correct. That is the proposal.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you. I just realized I was operating on an assumption, and I want to make sure I'm right about that. Are we the only district that would be attempting to cost share with a city like this? Have there ever been a district in the state that has taken part of the property insurance and passed it off to their municipality before, or would this be the first time that's been attempted?
I'm looking around. Ms. Kester.
I don't have an answer to that question. I don't know if Attorney Palmer does or if Superintendent Hunter does. I will say that I know the Sitka Borough has talked about facilities maintenance. I don't know what that means from a revenue perspective, but I have had conversations with Sitka Borough on that topic.
Mr. Palmer, do you have anything to add?
Potentially. So I do know of shared services agreements between multiple school districts. I can't recall I know of roughly 3 or 4. I can't recall specifically right now what those shared services cover. I will say definitively that the gravity of this ask, considering the school district's budget, is definitely the largest percentage that I believe Deed has ever encountered.
All right, Mr. Bryson and then Mr. Smith. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to be crystal clear on an answer here. So doing the math of when instructional time is versus when non-instructional time is, you have overnights as non-instructional period. Is that for like utilities and the heat? Is that how you split the day up? If there's the 10 hours that the kids are in it, and then the rest of the time period is when the city could take over expenses? Is that the logic?
Mr. Hauser.
Through the mayor, to Mr. Bryson, on my calculation, the city's calculation was 10 hours, and the calculation that the district submitted was 9.5 hours. But yeah, I was looking at what is the percentage of time or the hours in which instructional time is taking place, and that is during that 9.5 hours between 7:30 and 5 o'clock. And so the rest of the time would be considered non-instructional. And so heating the building, the utilities for the building, electrical, supporting the heating system, making sure that the pipes are running, and, supporting the facilities, mechanical structures are what I would consider non-instructional based on the definition of instructional, providing free public education.
Follow up, Mr. Bryson? You looking perplexed.
Well, I certainly don't have a question, Madam Mayor, but
Okay,
I'll go
let's
ahead.
stop it there. All right, Mr. Smith, Mr. Kelly, and then we're gonna let Ms. Kester finish her, going through the memo. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hauser, what is the best guess for an FY25 deficit? Let's just assume that the state raises the BSA to the level that it's at, that, the one-time funding is for this current fiscal year. Essentially, I'll just call it flat funding of, flat formula funding. And I realize you don't know, but it's not crystal clear, but like a range or just a ballpark, if you would.
Mr. Hauser.
Through the mayor, to Mr. Smith, thanks for asking me a nice, simple question. And I say that because I will actually change if you don't mind, the question a little bit. I don't think we can try to assume or make an assumption that there will be a BSA increase of $300 or $340, which is what the outside of the BSA funding was provided, the one-time funding for FY24. I don't think it's fair for us at this time to make that assumption. And so I hesitate to do that. And so my response will be what I know. And what I know right now is that currently, and this is going to answer a question that you had earlier, currently right now the Juneau School District for FY24 is facing a $7.9 million deficit. $2 million of that is carryover from FY23, which means we have a $5.9 million current ongoing projected, because these are built off of extrapolating out current expenditures from the beginning of the school year, really July 1 through December 19th. And then we extrapolated out based on the remainder of the pay periods and the costing that had happened to date to get to the 7.9 projected budget deficit. The reason why it's a difficult answer to provide is because a lot of it depends on the conversations we're having here right now. If the Assembly were to say, yes, we would support the $3.9 million request that the district is asking of them to support the district is asking of the Assembly to support some of these non-instructional maintenance, utilities, property insurance, and operational costs, that would still leave about $4 million of that loan that needs to happen. So let's say that takes place. And it goes to your question earlier that the reason why we really need to have an understanding of what the FY24 to zero it out is so we can prepare that next budget for FY25, because the board cannot approve a budget that is not balanced. So we have a budget revision that is just kind of waiting, and we are continuing, and I think this is another important point, we are continuing to try to identify savings every single day. I'm talking to our partners to see if we can find different ways to cost shift some of our grant monies to cover some costs. We've already, through a grant that will be recognized tomorrow, or really an award that will be recognized tomorrow from Central Council and Clinco Hyde for our some support that we're putting towards instruction. We're going to be able to recognize some monies that'll go towards, some of our staff costs. And so these are things that we're continuing to do. So my goal between now and the end of the year is to continue to find cost savings, whether it's in current health insurance costs that we're looking at and continue to look at. We've already claimed back almost $2 million from what was projected in there, and we're continuing to look at that and hoping we can realize more savings in some of the estimated and budgeted healthcare costs that we put in place, to looking at, we've frozen, paper. I mean, this is your paper. I've got my computer up because I have yet to print one single piece of paper in my office since I've said there's been a paper freeze. If teachers and staff are going to have to suffer through not having access to paper to print, so is the superintendent. That's the focus, and we're trying to do everything we can to get to a savings moving forward. So to answer your question, I just wanted to paint that picture. We need to get to a balanced budget FY24. Let's say we get to that zero balanced budget. We've got the loan for $4 million. The current structural deficit we're looking at right now is about $8 million. I don't foresee that if we make no changes right now, that is going to carry over. Plus, we have salary increases. If we don't make any changes for next FY25, structural changes, as well as potentially looking at increasing pupil-teacher ratio costs, which will have an impact on the number of staff that we would need. If we don't start making changes now, then if we were to carry this over, I would imagine you'd probably see anywhere from $9 to $11 million. And this is a guess. If we make zero changes to currently how we're operating now, no structural changes, no staffing changes. And that is just saying we are at a 0 point. Now, there could be additional savings. Like I said, I could find some, going through as we get further in and seeing what our spending savings really align to. We might end up with a fund balance at the end, which would be, or not really a fund balance, but a revenue leftovers at the end, which will go into a fund balance, or really will prepare us to start paying off that loan in FY26 and making sure that we have some reserves in there, because we've not had reserves for 2 years now, or really 3 years from the 21-22 school year. So that's the piece that's why we're starting to, restructure, having conversations every single day for the last 2 weeks. I've been having evening events, and the board has been there, and community have been getting me input. And so these are the conversations we're having around restructuring, because we realize, and the board, I think, realizes that there has to be restructuring. We have to look at that projected deficit for FY25, like I said, because we don't know if there's going to be a BSA increase or what that's going to look like. And so those costs are going to continue unless we make some adjustments.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I've decided to ask my question offline and allow the manager to continue her report.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kester, why don't we do your report up through, what about FY 2025? Let's see if we can get a little further.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next section of the memo really covers staff recommendation if they simply wants to do more than the manager's recommendation. You have heard Superintendent Hauser's justification for how he got to his percentages. I'll just briefly underscore how we got to ours. The reality is, the likely reality is, if we move forward with a request and an agreement with DEED, we would work closely with Superintendent Hauser and DEED to make sure, we're using the right justifications. Facilities maintenance, we believe that foreshadows the intention for taking over building maintenance, facilities maintenance, which is why we recommended it 100%. Utilities has a lovely calculation that Ms. Flick did that is very similar to Superintendent Hauser's. Property insurance is an interesting one. Staff is just uncomfortable taking on more than 50% of property insurance because we have no control over how the facilities are used, and so it would be, we want that kind of connection to remain between the expense and the behavior, because of course property insurance rates go up when you have property insurance claims, and so divesting that entirely, we don't recommend. And then we don't recommend operations or custodial because, the community use and like community schools use outside of operational hours, should be cared for with community schools. That's certainly something I think you could make an argument on, but that is how we came to those percentages. Bottom line is the number is very similar to the school district's number, and we would collaborate and make sure we had the most airtight case possible moving forward with DEED should the assembly choose to go in that direction.
Questions on that section before we move on? Ms. Hale?
I think I know the answer to this. So, Madam Manager, in the table at the bottom of page 2, we have a $3.922 million price tag. Is that per year?
Ms. Kester?
Correct. So for fiscal year 2025, it would actually be about 4.05 million. I think we assumed 3% inflation pressure on that.
So if we flip back to page 9 of our big packet, we'd be talking about 8 million. What am I looking for? Oh, that TBD on FY '24 JSD shared services. We'd really be looking at $8 million for FY '24 and '25 JSD shared services coming out of our one-time funds.
If you decide to fund it out of one-time funds, that is correct.
Super, thank you.
All right. Okay, Mr. Bryson.
Would we be able to do 100% of the funding to the school district as a loan and not give any additional funding and just loan them the money that they need to balance the budget? Because this is their mistake. Let's let them pay back 100% of that. Can we?
Mr. Bryson, I'm going to stop you. The answer, short answer would be yes, but that's further down the memo.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Kester, let's go all the way up to recommendations. And I think we're going to take a break then.
Okay. So what about beyond fiscal year 2025? I alluded to that in my opening comments. The manager's proposal recognizes that with absorbing facilities maintenance, there will be ongoing operating budget pressure for CBJ. The request from the Juneau School District is for fiscal year 2024 and 2025. However, you all have been through the funding cycle many more times than I have, and those are, once that expectation is established for funding, it becomes very difficult to change that because, of course, the tremendous impact it has on our community, cuts to school districts. DEED is the wild card in that, Attorney Palmer talked about maybe there's a negotiation with DEED that has a time limit. That's certainly one of the unpredictable factors of beyond fiscal year 2025. You want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. How to pay for direct expenditure to GSD? You could increase the mill rate. $4 million is 0.65 mils. You could decrease the debt service mill rate. So you recall that the debt service mill rate does have some upcoming capacity. We talked about it a little bit in our last agenda item. You certainly could increase your general mill rate, decrease general services mill rate, decrease your debt service mill rate to cover that. The only caution is we have a lot of capital pressure, capital expenditure needs, as evidenced on page 9 of the big packet, and paramount among those are investments in schools. You could fund from unrestricted general fund balance. The caution against that, of course, is that if these do end up being reoccurring expenditures, that puts future assembly and hopefully the same manager, but we don't really know, in a difficult position. And so that those are kind of the suite of options proposed for paying for those cash payments in 2024 and 25. Would you like me to move on to talk about the loan?
Yes, we'll stop at recommendations.
All right,
We'll
excellent.
take a break then.
The recommendation, the manager's recommendation is a loan of $6.3 million. That would be in addition to the cash payment of $1.6 million for facilities maintenance to make the district whole. We talked at the last meeting on the 30th about the conditions of having a finance professional that has access to the school district books, not only to help understand, but also to really assist the school district. We've got a lot of experience in our finance department. Another condition of that loan would be presenting a payback plan for the remaining 3 years. And I did talk to Superintendent Hauser about a equal payment in FY 26, 27, and 28. And he indicated that is what the district would be looking for. And of course, how you could fund that loan with unrestricted general fund balance or the restricted budget reserve. And there is a link on your online packet to Resolution 2629, which outlines the recommendations on the restricted budget reserve. We talked about those earlier in the evening.
Okay, thank you. So right now, let's take questions, and then we'll take a short break and then come back to recommendations. Mr. Smith.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Ms. Kester, just so I'm clear, the actually, maybe it's, just so I'm clear, the FY '26, 3.5 million for facilities maintenance, CBJ, that, and I think we talked about it this last meeting, that does not actually reduce the deficit of the school district. That is just additional cost to provide what we think might be more adequate and CBJ-run maintenance on school district facilities. Is that correct?
It does relieve their budget of $1.6 million that they're currently spending on facilities maintenance.
Very good.
Follow up, or you good?
I have another question, but
You have to wait your turn.
very good.
Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It has been mentioned that they're continuously looking at ways to reduce expenses. Has crosstown busing and other transportation, like the transporting within a mile of the school, have those type of issues been discussed on how you could do them differently next year to reduce expenses?
I'll go to Mr. Hauser.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. To Member Bryson, we've started preliminary having conversations about transportation for next year. A lot of that is going to depend on reorganization. If there is a consolidation of the middle schools down to one middle school, consolidation of the high schools down to one high school, that of course would definitely have an impact on the transportation costs. In some ways positive, because you'd have less buses potentially going to different schools, but you know, in some cases at the middle school, depending on the school that is the sole remaining middle school, there could be an increase in cost because we do have one middle school that is currently functioning with just one bus, and the rest is the students walk to school. And so those students would need to be transported to the middle school, wherever that was, unless it was out in the valley close to where they live. So we are starting to look at that and look at what some of those transportation costs are going to potentially look like. But at this point, it's still pretty early. I have reached out to First Student, and we are planning on meeting within the next week to start preliminary conversations, especially once we get a little more direction from the board of what might be some possible reorganization, more firm, I should say, reorganization models might look like. Then we can have more detailed conversations of costing for transportation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hauser. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I guess my question would be to the manager. I think I have a proposal in mind, and I was thinking maybe a break might be the first a good opportunity to do some recalculations. So is the 0.65 mils that you're suggesting, is that coming, so that pays for specifically just the maintenance that we would take on?
Ms. Chester?
0.65 mils represents $4 million in our operating budget. So if you just think of it in those terms, and then of course $4 million is the FY24 and FY25 request from JSD.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Smith, and then I have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Kester, just so I kind of am doing the math correctly. So if we follow your recommendation in FY25, the school district, to get to a balanced budget, would be having to make up their structural deficit, which we heard may be as high as 9 anyway, with about $1.8 million in support or assistance from the city. So therefore, they'd be needing to make cuts of $7 million. Is that about right?
Ms. Fleck, we're going to the numbers person.
Mr. Smith, without pulling out Excel and doing the math precisely, I believe your thought process is correct.
Very good. Can I have a follow-up too?
Yes.
So for FY26 then, assuming the loan is about what we say and the repayments are about $2.1 million, they would then be needing to cut their essential, they would be needing to cut a structural deficit and due now to the loan repayments kind of being actually above what is being recommended for support from the city. So they would then be essentially having to make up that entire structural deficit via cuts. Like the support from the city is actually less than the loan repayment, assuming the loan repayment's $2.1 million.
Ms. Fleck?
Through the chair, yes, Mr. Smith, again, your thought process is correct. So the loan payment, assuming we go with the numbers presented here, if it's $2.1 million a year and facilities maintenance comes fully to CBJ in FY '26, that's 1.6 million.
500. 1.6.
1.6 million in some numbers that would be available if the assembly funds at the same level to the school district. So yes, they would have to make additional cuts for that $500,000-ish, assuming that the decisions they made in '25 to be structurally balanced are continued on through.
Very good, thank you.
All right. Seeing that, I'll jump in with my question. Under your loans, you say as part of the loan conditions, CBJ will hire a finance professional. Can we do that as a condition for any help from us and not just a loan? So I'm saying if we give them one time, can we do it without even giving them a loan? Because what I'm concerned with is the loan ends in 5 years, and we probably want to keep someone with the school district. Nothing against the school district, but we probably want to keep someone with the school district further than 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do that. I think, I do want to acknowledge that it's only as good as the relationship and the trust that you can build with the staff at JSD. So exactly what that looks like to be successful is something that we will need to put some work into, right? Because the vision is that we have a collaborative working relationship and are able to help support JSD and support the assembly when you are like, hey, I have questions about, this or that. And so I just want to add that qualifier as we discuss that position.
Thank you, Ms. Kester. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Kind of similar thought process, and I really appreciate Madam Manager's comments just now, because I agree, really, for us to be successful in working together towards the same goals that we all have as two different bodies, it takes trust and collaboration. I just wanted to add in something I didn't see that I imagine perhaps with more support or with a financial position, that perhaps in those subsequent years that we would see something, a budget book that was more like our own. Is that something we would anticipate? And that's not at all an attack on the school district, but as we refine this process, we would get to where it's easier to get questions answered, I guess.
Okay, Ms. Kester.
I think that's a reasonable expectation, and I know Superintendent Hauser has been working towards that, probably derailed as of late.
Understandably.
Yeah, Mr. Hauser, you want to answer that?
I can, yeah, through the mayor, thank you very much. So I would say that it hasn't been completely derailed. So we are actually in the process of getting ready to work with our accounting software, the company that provides our accounting software, to be able to have and integrate all of our systems more seamlessly to where we are able to provide reports, be able to print out actuals, and really work on having a more streamlined approach to being able to report out reports that are more tied to our staffing, to the budget, to the expenditures. Really trying to do everything we can to get it very streamlined, and that would be part of that partnership as we're working with the city and some requests that might come through. And part of that is the conversation with the budget book and making sure that we have a budget book that is more provides more detailed information. And these are conversations that Mr. Muldoon, our finance chair, and Ms. Pierce, our finance contractor, have been talking about already in the process of developing our FY25 budget, making sure that we have something that is maybe a little bit more substantial than what has been provided in the past. So we're still working through that process. That part has gotten a little bit off the tracks, but we still are trying to work towards that to make sure that we're able to provide a very accurate depiction of where we currently are at any point through the year in the budgeting process and also through our finances.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hauser, just briefly, in the model for school consolidation that you've looked at, what is just the general range in possible savings from those efforts?
Mr. Hauser?
Yeah, through the mayor. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Right now, as we're looking at consolidation reorganization, I can give you kind of duplicate staffing numbers of what we're anticipating. So if we were to close in elementary school, you would potentially save from duplicate staffing about $688,000. And that's based on current expenditures of staff in those positions right now and that's an average across all 6 elementary schools for what we would consider a duplicate position, your principals, your librarians, your counselors, and those positions that you wouldn't necessarily have to have multiple of at the building. At the middle school level, it's about $933,000 for the duplicate staffing, and then at the high school, it's about $1.3 million if you were to consolidate. Now, if you put both the high schools together, I would argue that you at that point might want to have a principal and 2 assistant principals, so that savings might be a little less just because you have more staff at one school and you're going to need some more administrative support there. There's also potential savings if we were to close a building and turn that building back over to the city. There's utility savings, which of course would be dependent on if there's a shared service agreement and how much the city would be willing to put towards that. But there would be some savings there as far as maintenance and operations savings from custodial. Property insurance would decrease a little bit because we have less square footage, that we would need to insure. And so there's a lot of other cost factors in those savings. But right now, I'm comfortable giving you those rough numbers for staffing. The other numbers are really, there's a lot of factors that could impact what those savings might look like.
Ms. Atkinson?
Thank you. This is also for Superintendent Hauser. Sorry to grill you. Kind of jumping off of Mr. Smith's question, did those numbers account for hold harmless? I'm not asking to predict like 4 years out when that's not a thing anymore, but currently does that account for hold harmless?
Mr. Hauser?
Yeah, through the mayor to Ms. Atkinson, no, it does not. And just so everybody, for the record, everybody understands. So when buildings are closed, it's not termed hold harmless, but it's like a step down approach. But they often refer to it as like a hold harmless, which is a separate statute when enrollments drop considerably. And the districts, and a lot of districts across the state, enacted the hold harmless rule when the pandemic hit and a lot of enrollment numbers started to plummet. But really what happens, and I'll just walk through it closely, it doesn't take it into consideration because until we know the structures, and that's part of the work that I'm going to be trying to do over the next week is we're still waiting on the final projected enrollment numbers. I was supposed to get them on Monday, but they're not coming until hopefully next week. I had a conversation with a demographer on Monday, but when you close a school, those students that transfer to the new school, and I'm just going to use this as an example because it's easy numbers and it's easy for people to realize. You have 2 high schools in the Juneau School District. Let's say we were to consolidate one high school. Both high schools, let's say, are at 500 students each. When those students at those high schools consolidate down, it becomes a school of 1,000. In that model, that school of 1,000 now is in a new school size adjustment. It goes from what is a school size adjustment, I think it's 400 and 450 to about 750. We've now gone from that mid-size school size adjustment to the 750 and above school size adjustment, which is a change of a calculation for the average daily membership of 0.92 at that 400 to 750 range to a 0.84. So you lose the multiplier the larger the school gets. So we'll lose a multiplier, and it will have a long-term impact on the overall cost that is generated and the revenue that's generated from that school size adjustment, which is part of the foundation formula. But this step-down approach, for the first 2 years, those students that moved from that school that was closed to the new school are actually placed in what they refer to as like a ghost school. And that ghost school is still at that same funding level from an ADM perspective, that multiplier that they were originally at. And so instead of them, even though they're in a school that now is in this 750 and above, those 500 students are actually still getting that 0.92 multiplier for 2 years. Year 3, it steps down to 66% of that difference between what the new multiplier is and what their ghost school multiplier was. And then the next year it goes down to 33%. And then moving forward, that they are fully transitioned into their new school, and they're calculated at the ADM percentage for average or school size adjustment for that school that they're currently occupying. And so initially, there'll be more savings, if you will, because the students generate more ADM multiplier. It's not much, but it's enough to make a difference. But after year 3 and year 4, it drops down, and then by year 5, there's no additional kind of that step down or hold harmless. But it does not consider that because we just don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, so we did, go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. So actually, Ms. Atkinson didn't ask my question. Mr. Hauser answered most of what my question would have been. I just want to add, I guess I would appreciate, I think that I'm looking forward to seeing exactly what after we've had a chance to look at what our projected enrollment is, I would be interested in seeing exactly what we can anticipate our savings to be. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one last one. So, Mr. Hauser, say your FY25 structural deficit's 9 million, and where you go through school consolidation and you save $1.5 million or whatever, and city supports you to the tune of 1.8 million. With 90% of your costs being due to people, you would expect significant, if you had to balance that deficit, there would be significant reductions in staff.
Mr. Hauser.
To the mayor, to Mr. Smith, there are some other factors that come into play. Again, we don't know what the legislature is going to do. We don't know if there's potentially going to be a BSA increase. There's also, as we start looking at what the assessed value is of the land, which determines essentially what the maximum local contribution is, that could, as property assessed values go up, we're able to receive more of the maximum local contribution. So that could have some positive impact for FY25 as we're looking at building the revenues and then looking at the expenditures for FY25. If there's a BSA increase, that could have an impact on that as well. So there's a lot of factors that come into play that could impact what the essential staffing impact is going to be for reductions. But the realities are there's going to have to be an increase most likely. If nothing changes, there will be significant impact on some of our staff. We'll have to increase pupil-teacher ratio, even with the reorganization. And of course, we would go through that and try to work closely with managed attrition and trying to find the best way to move through that while still being able to provide high-quality education and opportunities for our students.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to do this a little bit differently because I'm chair today. Since we just got this memo today, I'm going to take a significant break right here. Then we're going to come back and the manager is going to give us her recommendation. So during this break, use the facilities, but also if you have some more questions, please feel free to talk to staff. So I have 7:23. Let's come back at 7:35. So we'll bring us back to order. Madam Manager, will you give us your recommendations?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The recommendations are broken out into 3 separate ordinances. The intention is to introduce these ordinances at a special meeting before the Committee of the Whole on February 26th, with final adoption on the 11th. Assemblymember Wahal Gadak requested additional public hearing on the item, so we would try to work. I believe there's a March 6th meeting that we are looking at as a date to insert some extra public process on this. Of course, any agreement will need to be There will be reciprocating actions that the school board will need to do, and DEED will need to be involved. So the idea is that if we can get some real direction from the body tonight, then we can put those wheels in motion. So the number one item on this list is for fiscal year 2024, and discuss the assembly comfort in paying for operational costs. JSD is deemed non-instructional. Keep in mind, the manager's recommendation is one-time funding from unrestricted general fund balance in the amount of $1.65 million, and that represents facilities, offsetting their facilities maintenance costs.
All right, so that's the first one, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that we direct staff to draft an ordinance with one-time funding from unrestricted general fund balance for an amount in the amount of 1.65, 405, and ask for unanimous consent.
I think I saw a hand over here first, Mr. Bryson. Objection, Mr. Bryson.
I'm going to object to direct cash payment. I'm going to support loans. I don't believe some of the things that we've done do pass the red face test, so I'm going to object to the one-time funding. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I have Ms. Wall and then Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment to the deputy mayor's motion. I would like to change the amount, the rest of the motion is fine. The amount to 293, sorry. $3,922,787, which is the amount that the manager has in the, if the assembly wants to do more. And if I could speak to my amendment.
Go ahead.
Well, I think Mr. Smith really touched on kind of the severity of the financial situation that our school district faces, and it doesn't take a leap of imagination to understand what the catastrophic impacts on our quality of education for years to come would be of the types of cuts that they are facing. And, you know, I think when I see the manager's recommendation, the reason that she proposed 1.6 million was because she's concerned that these costs will be ongoing and that that will have impacts on our operating budget, which will necessitate a cut in CBJ services, mill rate increases, and some combination of these two. I wholeheartedly agree that that is an impact of what we are talking about here, but I think our community, when faced with catastrophic cuts to our education, would choose cuts to other services or mill rate increases to avoid kind of the severity of this situation for education. I also think that if, you know, that's an assumption that I have about what the community wants. We're going to start the public process here to ask them. I think if we start with a number like 1.65, the feedback we're going to get from the community is, why are you not doing more to help the school district? I think if we put out there a number that is the max that we can do, I think the feedback gets much more interesting. It's feedback on, what does our community want? Do they want to prioritize education? Do they want to pay more for that? Do they want other services cut? So I'm much more interested in that feedback than the immense pushback I know we will receive by only putting in 1.6 million.
Thank you. So now we have an amendment. Any objection? Mr. Bryson.
I'm going to object. I would, at the very least, appreciate a lower amount cash expenditure, one-time cash expenditure. So the 3.9 sounds way worse than 1.65. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hale?
I will object. And I don't know if this question is out of order, but perhaps I could pose the question to the maker of the amendment. We're not talking about FY '25 yet, and my question to the maker of the amendment would be, would you be recommending this same 3.922 for FY '25 as for FY '24?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Great question. Yes, I would. I think my rationale stands for both of those things.
Ms. Atkinson?
I actually am in complete support of this amendment. I was objecting originally to the 1.6 million. I've made no secret that I'm a little nervous about the way that we're interpreting statute, but it's very clear to me that the attorney and the superintendent are going to be moving forward in talks with Deed, and that this isn't going to be, slid in, or there's no rug pulled out from underneath us later. If if in the conversations with Deed, they tell us we can't do this, then we reevaluate. But it's not a situation where we're going to be 2 years down the line and they told us we can't do it anymore. So I do think that this is a good starting point, and we should try for as much as we can get because our school district is really struggling.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Mr. Smith, do you object?
No.
Okay, well, never mind. We've had objection to speaking to him. Go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm supportive of this effort. It is for FY '24, and that's what the motion is. It reduces the amount of the loan, and remember that the more we reduce the loan, and this is obviously how it all works, the less they'll have to pay off each year. And as we've heard from the superintendent, there is deficits out there. The larger the loan is, unless, again, we should probably not hope for anything from the legislature. Assuming flat funding, those will just be more cuts that they have to make. So I'm willing to step in and help where we can here to reduce the amount of that loan, reduce the amount of cuts they'll have to make in the future. Thanks.
Ms. Hughes-Candies?
Thanks. I will keep this shorter. I think Mr. Smith just articulated some of my reasons I'll support this. This is just talking about 24 at this point. It's less of a loan, and I think Ms. Wall articulated very well. While we are putting this in play, I think everything's happening so fast, but starting with a larger number and then determining what the feedback is to that and seeing what that feels like, helping them the most we can in this first big crunch. That's what I'm interested in. But I'm not going to talk about future years because I'm not committing to that, but this makes the most sense to me, and I'd like to see the feedback.
I have a question for Ms. Wall. Is your motion up to that amount or that amount flatly?
Up to that amount. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, I'm going to object. I appreciate that. I appreciate the up to. I support education, but as I said before, I have a little trouble with the percentages going to utilities and operations and everything like that. I just don't quite see how we can do that. I know that there's been conversations with Deed, but I was also at a conference this winter when we got smacked pretty hard that we were the only district that got a letter from Deed saying, don't do that. So, and also I just, there's a problem. It needs to be restructured. It needs to be reconfiguration with the school district. And I think just handing the money isn't helpful because we can hope that it's flat funded, but if it's not flat funded, increase in BSA, you can expect that the public will want us to increase the cap. So this could be more than almost $4 million. And, we're just looking at our fund balance and trying to go, how are we going to do these projects that are all good? And this will just take money away from that. So I object. Ms. Hale, you had something to add?
I did, thank you. Echoing, again, I'm referring to page 9, where we have a long list of incredibly important projects. And so we are balancing that 3.9 million for FY '24 against that long list of projects. And particularly if we went to FY '25 with the 3.9 million, that's $8 million. And I totally agree that we want to make the loan as small as possible. And this is a mechanism for doing that. But at the same time, we've got to balance these needs with all of our other needs. And we also have to ask the school board, I know you're all in a very difficult position, but we have to ask you to make really hard decisions and have really hard conversations. So that's my concern, is that that's a lot of money that we're taking away from the rest of our city, public safety, communication infrastructure, for example.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Anything else? So my last comment, I'll just take off Ms. Hale. We're asking the school district to make hard decisions. If they don't make them, then we will have to make those same decisions. So before you vote on that, think about what we can cut from the city. So with that, we have an amendment and objection. Madam Wendell, Ms. Wendell, I almost called you Spiegel. Call the roll.
Mayor, we're voting on the amendment right now?
We're voting on the amendment. Do you want to repeat the amendment for us, Ms. Wendell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will state the original motion and then the amendment, and we will vote on the amendment. The original motion by Assemblymember Hale was to direct staff to draft an ordinance with one-time funding from unrestricted general fund balance in the amount of $1,650,405. Assemblymember Wall made an amendment to that motion to change the amount to up to $3,922,787. Assemblymember Wall.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale.
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak.
Yes.
Chair Walden.
No.
Motion passes, 6 ayes, 3 nays.
Thank you, Ms. Wendell. Back to the main motion as amended. Any objection? Mr. Bryson?
I just think I'll leave my past statements. Everybody knows where I stand. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion as amended. An objection, please call the roll.
On the motion to direct staff to draft an ordinance with one-time funding from unrestricted general fund balance in the amount of $3,922,787. Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson.
No.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly, excuse me.
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes. Yes.
Assemblymember Wall.
Yes.
Chair Weldon.
No.
Motion passes, 7 ayes, 2 nays.
All right, Mrs. Kester, you want to talk about your next one?
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is for fiscal year 2025. As we discussed tonight, the school district needs to understand what the Assembly is willing to do as they put together their budget that needs to be submitted in March to DEED. Manager's recommendation is the same on fiscal year 2025, one-time funding from unrestricted general fund balance for $1.65 million.
All right, we'll go to Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and just question or a statement. When we were talking about that 3.922, that's using the percentages in Manager Kester's budget. And I would be, the proposal I will be making for this 25 will be the same. I move that we direct staff to draft an ordinance for one-time funding from unrestricted general fund balance for an amount in the amount of $1.650, $405 for FY '25. And I would like to speak to that motion if I may, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Madam.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that I understand all of the reasons for going with the 3.922, and I also understand that Assemblymember Wall will probably try to amend the motion that I've just made. I think that if we think about where we're trying to go, which is a school district with a sustainable budget in the long term, obviously addressing structural issues that have been there for a long time, and where we're trying to go to get there, I think that this steps down. So this is a step down from the 3.9 million to a 1.65 million. Because after that, not only do they have to be paying back the loan, but they actually have to have a completely balanced budget. So that's my proposal. I would really argue for that. I understand where people are, but I'd argue for the 1.65.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Any objection? Ms. Atkinson?
I would object to it for purposes of amendment. I would like to amend the number to be $3,922,787 for the same reasons that Assemblymember Wall, did last time.
Thank you. Any objection? Do you want to speak to your objection?
I believe that this course of action gets us right back in this predicament in 3 years. We're doing big bailouts. I don't think that is going to put enough pressure to correct the structural deficits. And in future years, we may not have a fund balance that we could have bailed the city, the school district out. And had we not spent the last 5 years being super careful, 5-hour finance meetings during the pandemic, I mean, we looked at every single dollar and we were diligent about it. And we have a fund balance that reflects how diligent we had been with the city's fund so that we could build a fund balance. And now we are correcting another entity's mistake without seeing the structural deficit. And I think that that is just a setup that's going to put us in here in 3 or 4 years, and we might not have the fund balance to just go and bail the school district out again. I say that we keep the numbers lower, see the structural changes that really need to happen, and then I would feel way more comfortable with how we're allocating funds to the school district. We've gone to the cap every year, and it's not enough. So at some point, we have to say, this is enough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, this is a terrible discussion point for all of us. I don't think anyone loves the situation we're in. I know the school board doesn't, and I know we don't, and really we all are in the same boat together. I just want to be really clear that this is, although we are two separate elected bodies, we are, one city, and we need schools. And so as I'm approaching this and trying to see what looks feasible financially, looking at our own money, all of it is public money. And I think it's a pretty commonly shared value within the city and borough of Juneau that we value our public school system. I am looking at this not from a perspective of I know better and I know how to get them where they need to go, because I do not envy being in the school board member's shoes right now, because I've been sort of trying to estimate, and as superintendent was going, I really don't know how financially they are going to be able to get to a balanced budget. But I also, given what we've funded historically, don't know that it makes sense for us. I don't know that we have the capacity to fill in a ton more than we already have been filling in. I asked earlier, envisioning what the manager's recommendation was with the 1.65, and I'll try to be less wordy, Madam Chair, but putting the 1.65 with the historical 2.3 that we've done outside of cap expenses, we're talking about getting to basically $4 million and the cap. It is not lost on me that we are starting to get into a situation where this is happening with school districts everywhere. We are, as much as I would like to solve for the state government or solve for the federal government, I just sometimes have problems we want to solve that we don't have the financial capacity to do so. So at this point, I'm looking for a glide path that is an attempt to help the school district have time to figure out how to get to a balanced budget. And 4 million and the cap funding seems like maybe a sort of step down approach. So that's how I'm thinking about it now. Because I think if we did this 24 and 25 and then just a hard stop when they needed to start making payments, I don't know. I'm looking for what pencils out most realistically, and doing 1.65 seems like a good next step in the process.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies, and seeing no hands. Oh, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is for Ms. Flicker, maybe, anyway, for staff. So say this goes through at a 1.65 million level, and then the school district builds their budget off that, submits it to us, has a, significant deficit, proposes the changes, and when we see that, I guess, could we do a supplemental, or could we do something during the regular budget process to add these costs in? Should the options presented in the school district budget, if we don't do them now, be so terribly unpalatable that we're not willing to go there? Is that possible in the process?
Ms. Flick.
Through the chair, Mr. Smith, as the assembly, you always have an option to pass supplemental appropriations. I think what makes this situation perhaps a little more difficult is that the school district does face really hard decisions, and they don't have an option to present a deficit budget. And as the assembly, you need their FY25 budget requests as you build the entire city's FY25 budget. So I think your decisions that you make today, the direction that you give staff to build ordinances, provides the guidance that the school board needs in order to make their decisions to quickly turn around an FY25 budget where their revenue does equal their expenditures, because that, by law, they have to do that. That's their choice. I mean, they don't have another choice. They have to have a structurally balanced budget.
But we could do something on the pending list or something during the budget process, and we do, and sometimes we add operational costs, and then we consider those in terms of the mill rate. But, so there is a process to, in which to adjust that.
Absolutely, Mr. Smith. That is the assembly's prerogative as part of the budget process.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to speak and then we'll go to you, Ms. Atkinson, because you've already talked. So we've already okayed close to $4 million, and then the next 25, so I obviously object to the amendment, we're going to look at another $4 million. So we pretty much wiped out their deficit. They don't even need to get a loan from us. And we're not looking at cutting anything in our budget. In fact, we have several budget increases that we're looking at. And we just lost a ballot measure because people were pissed off about their property tax. So this will make us increase to 0.64 mils because we have the fund balance now, but we don't have it carrying forward. So I just can't get behind this, and I'm disappointed that the assembly is okay with doing this because I'm sorry for the school district, and I know that they had circumstances that weren't necessarily all their fault. We can't be dumped on us to pay for it all, and so I'm going to object. Ms. Atkinson, did you have a quick thing to add?
I just want to say that at the end of the day, the city is the district is the city. And if we want to look at this not from a who did something wrong and who is making mistakes and should pay for them, at the end of the day, this is something that affects our kids and it affects our city at large, right? We want the icebreaker to come here. We want people to move here in the city to grow, and we want Juneau to be a strong capital city. And our school district is a huge part of that. And it's not easy for me to want to propose spending this much money on the district. It's hard because I know we'll have to either cut things or raise property taxes. But at the end of the day, if we don't do it, they do not have the capacity to do it. And every cut directly affects kids and parents and staff. And so at the end of the day, even though it's not an easy decision and I want to point fingers, I think we just need to buckle down and do whatever we can to fund our district as much as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. I have Ms. Hale, Mr. Smith, excuse me, Mr. Bryson, and then Mr. Smith. And Ms. Wall, sorry.
We're down 1,500 students since 2000. And during that time, we actually have built a school. And what we've seen over the years is that the conversation about closing a school or consolidating is really hard and really uncomfortable, and the school board has not been interested, not been willing to have that conversation. And I know the school board is 7 individual members, and they come on and they go off, just like the assembly does. And so when you say the school board, it's always a changing entity. But we're down 1,500 students, and we have all of these schools. And my concern about going with the 3.9 for FY25 is it's not sending the message that you really have to do something about this. I attended the meeting earlier in the week where I attended remotely, earlier in the week where the school board was discussing Superintendent Hauser's recommendation of what the ask to the assembly would be. And I was really disappointed that an entire hour was spent working through one number after the other of that recommendation for what the ask would be. And then there were motions and they failed or not. But at the end of the day, after 1 hour, the ask from the school board was exactly what Superintendent Hauser had presented to the school board. But there wasn't commitment, there wasn't discussion about what the commitment of the school board would be to the assembly and to the city of Juneau for addressing this fundamental structural deficit that's been there for a long time, structural problems that have been there for a long time. So I'm 1.65 on this one. I think we do need to step it down. And I am asking, I know this is a terrible pressure time for school board members. It's a huge burden, but I'm really asking you to work with us and kind of come back and give back to us when we're giving to you.
Okay, we have, thank you, Ms. Hale. We have Mr. Bryson and then Mr. Smith and then Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really dislike the precedent that this would set. Blow through, your budget's blown up, you messed your budget up, your budget got messed up, regardless of the situation that messed any city departments. We look at we got 16 departments in the city. And so then if the assembly just comes in and snaps our fingers, took care of their problems, wiped out $8 million of the money that we spent time saving up, I don't like the precedent that this sets. I think that keeping it at 1.65 puts more of the onus on the school district. And when it comes down to it, all right, thank you for the time, Madam Mayor. I'm still going to object.
All right, thank you. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have not seen the FY25 budget. We'll see that soon. We know there will be difficult things in there. I think where I'm right now is I'm going to vote against this amendment. However, when we see that budget and probably some terrible things in there, I will be happy to sponsor a potential, I can't remember what the term is now, community request or whatever to potentially look at these. But I'm hearing from some of my assembly members that they want to see people go through the work and look at what that looks like. And I think we'll see it, and I don't think we will like that picture. And at that point, we still have time to adjust it in the FY25 budget. I do also kind of want to say the cuts the school boards have to make are painful. They cannot raise revenue. I mean, they're cutting programs and teachers and things. And we shouldn't throw stones from a glass house because our cutting has not been very good. And anyway, so that's, just want to keep that in mind. So thank you, but I am going to vote against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We have Ms. Wall, and then I'm going to call the question. Oh, Mr. Kelly, and then I'll call a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel like I ask this question every 6 months and I apologize, but earlier you asked me to specify whether I was putting out a number or putting out that number up to, and I wanted to double check whether the maker of the amendment included up to, and then I want to be reminded by our attorney if a number is chosen, if 1.6 is chosen, we hear from the public, are we able to change that number?
We'll start with the maker of the motion,
I don't believe I did include up to, but I meant to include up to.
and then we'll go to the attorney.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And Ms. Wall, this issue keeps bubbling up. Good news for you, we have an Assembly Rules Amendment coming to HRC at the next March meeting to clarify this question. But for the time being, the Roberts Rules issue that we keep bumping up against does not directly apply to the Finance Committee. So you could change the amount through the budget process if you choose to.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, and then we'll call the question.
Thank you. I think in some ways, Ms. Atkinson couldn't have said it better, that this is, that regardless of who's at fault, who's going to pay the price is not the school board. Who's going to pay the price is the teachers and the students. I also think, though, that Assemblymember Smith makes a good point. I think it's better for the district to budget with a shorter amount, and then if we, at a later point, can raise that amount, because this isn't the final decision. This is just, at this point, giving direction and saying telegraphing where the assembly can go. I would rather come in low and then have the flexibility to go high. So I will be, it's a tough decision for me because I 100% support education and support our teachers. But at this committee meeting, I will be a no vote.
Certainly. 2 minutes. Got your question answered, Mr. Smith? Yes. All right, Madam Clerk, we have an amendment and we have objection. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The original motion by Assemblymember Hale was to direct staff to draft an ordinance with one-time funding from unrestricted general funds in the amount of $1,650,405, and this is for the FY25 budget. The amendment by Assemblymember Atkinson was to change the amount to up to $3,922,787. Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale.
No.
Assemblymember Wall.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
No.
Chair Weldon.
No.
Motion fails, 3 ayes, 6 nays.
So back to the main motion. Madam Clerk, well, actually, is there any objection? Mr. Bryson, you need to speak to your objection. Please call the roll.
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wall.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies.
Yes.
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak.
Yes.
Chair Weldon.
Yes.
Motion passes, 8 ayes, 1 nay.
Thank you. Madam City Manager, would you talk about number 3, and hopefully you guys have a number figured out of what the remaining amount would be?
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. So the third ordinance that needs to be introduced on the 26th is a loan. The amount of the loan not covered in direct assistance would be $4 million. The interest rate that was requested is 0%. The term that has been recommended is 5 years with the first year payback in 26, and then equal payments for those remaining 3 years. And the question that I believe needs some deliberation is whether the loan comes from an unrestricted general fund balance or restricted budget reserve.
Thank you. And could you tell us how we got to the $4 million loan, please? Number lady again, Ms. Flick.
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, and I will look for a nod from Superintendent Hauser to make sure that I am following this correctly. And I'm going to use round numbers. So the FY 24 assistance directed by the Assembly for us to create with an ordinance will leave a deficit of roughly $2 million, just over $2 million with FY 24.
You're getting a nod from Mr. Hauser.
Yep. And then the prior year's fund balance, FY 23, I believe some FY 22 was 1.9 million. For purposes of creating a loan, we're just going to call that $2 million. That will allow JSD and CBJ to work through exact numbers, but I think with your direction to do up to a $4 million loan, that will give them the structural balance needed for FY 24 and meeting deeds requirement. And I'm getting a nod from Mr. Hauser.
Okay, thank you for that. Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that staff draft an ordinance loaning up to $4 million to the Juneau School District at an interest rate of 0% The 5-year term, with first year of payback in FY '26 and equal payments for FY '27 and '28. And I move that that be paid from the restricted budget reserve. And I ask for unanimous consent. And I'd like to speak to my motion from the restricted budget reserve, if I may.
Go ahead, Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, I alluded to this earlier, but that restricted budget reserve is there when we have a plan, in an emergency, when we have a plan to pay it back. There's a clear plan to pay it back. It's an emergency. And that way we don't hit our unrestricted general fund balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. I'm assuming that the conditions discussed above under the loan thing are part of that loan.
That is correct. The conditions discussed above. Thank you.
All right, any objection to that? Oh, my goodness. Motion passes, quick. All right, and although it's been difficult for us, we can't even say how difficult it's been for the school board and the staff at the school district, so we appreciate all your time. So hopefully nothing that was said tonight makes anybody feel horrible, but there's just some disagreement in the room about the burden on who should get the burden. But we appreciate all the hard work, and we know that you're going to have a lot of hard work coming up. So, and we look forward to working with you whenever we can. With that, we have 2 items that I'm told are going to be quick. So does anybody need a break before we get to our quick items? Seeing no breaks, who is taking this next one? Ms. Kester or Ms. Fleck? It's a travel Juno program.
Madam Mayor, I will take that item. So as we discussed in our last month's AFC meeting, we are doing program updates from our 4 major partners. You heard from the JEDC last month. This month you'll get a program update from Travel Juno. They may share with you some of their aspirations for the upcoming year, but this is not a budget presentation. This is an update on the program. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Perry to do her presentation.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ferry.
Good evening, and thank you. My job here is to give you basically a highlights reel from fiscal '23. You have a copy of our annual report for that period. It's in your packet, and I see it up on the screen as well. I want to just hit some highlights. If you would go to the next slide, please. We are fully staffed at this point. Travel Juno has 5 departments. I have 6 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee, bookkeeper. And you can see that we all live the brand, if you will. We are outside people, we're fishing, we're enjoying everything that Juno has to offer, and we like to consider ourselves a fun group. Along those lines, I would like to also mention that Kirby Day and Andy Klein are in attendance this evening. They are members of the Travel Juno board. Also want to recognize Alex Pierce, who is our staff liaison, and Ms. Hughes Candies, who is our CBJ assembly liaison. The next slide, please. And next slide. We do have balance sheets here. The financials that you'll see on the balance sheets for us were delivered to the grants department with our second quarter report. I can get those to you specifically if you would like to see those. We're in pretty good shape. We did see some increase in funding for this year as opposed to previous in 22 when we had, we're still in COVID mode at that point. So we're really looking up. And if we could take a look at the next slide. One of the things I wanted to point out here is that we are working to increase our earned income from partners. And the other thing I wanted to point out that is on this sheet is that destination marketing and event group sales make up at least 50% of the operational budget. We are a marketing organization, and we try to keep those expenses in line with the mission. Next slide, please. These are visitation numbers, and again, these are pretty much as of the 23 season and fiscal 23. Want to just point out too that like air arrivals, one of the things that we struggle with is that we cannot get data from Alaska Airlines regarding who is from Juneau and who is not. So we get gross numbers, but we have been unable to establish how many people getting off the plane are Juneau residents and which ones actually are coming in to visit. So we kind of have to extrapolate a little bit, but numbers are looking good. We have pretty much rebounded from COVID. We're seeing a little bit of softness in the market because of inflationary pressures, price of gas, price of airfare, those kinds of things. But we really have a robust destination, and a lot of people want to come in as fully independent travelers, otherwise known as FIT, or to put on a convention, other event. If you go to the next slide, please. Convention sales is seeing renewed interest in Juneau as a destination for meetings. We have been attending meeting planner events and establishing relationships with meeting planners, especially on the west half of the U.S., and really focusing our attention to small market meetings. So those would be meetings that are right around 400 people or fewer. We're seeing a lot of interest in board meetings and getting those things underway. Next slide, please.
Ms. Perry, can I jump in and ask a quick question? Are we still being hampered by the lack of hotel rooms, or is that not as problem? Because are most of our conventions in the winter, or?
We're still being hampered by a lack of hotel rooms. Occupancy has been hanging around 60 to 70% over a running 12 months, but we did see some declines in occupancy this year relative to last year. Of course, during the same time period, we also had Ironman in 22 versus 23, but we're still seeing a fairly strong market. Juneau and Alaska in general still remain hot properties for folks. In destination marketing, we are seeing an increased use of our website. We're seeing higher levels of engagement all across our social channels, all of them. We are seeing in our landing pages, one of the favorite pages is how to get to Juneau by ferry. So keeping the Alaska Marine Highway engaged and letting them know that there is pent-up demand for people coming up, bringing RVs, or even walking on, leaving a car someplace and just hopping on the ferry and exploring. That's a really hot ticket, so keeping AMHS up and running and really getting it fleshed out is going to be important. You will notice also in your information that we have had a little bit of a drop in number of Facebook users. Those users tend to be a little bit older, but we have seen significant increases across our other platforms. We have an Instagram account, brand new TikTok account, and we are producing and rolling out information through those channels, and they are being picked up and are seeing really high levels of engagement. Another thing that we've noticed is that women are now the majority of the users across all platforms. And this year, we have found that more users are coming into the website through either their mobile phone or a tablet. So that has surpassed the use of a laptop. That is new for this year. So people are going mobile. They really are making that shift, and our website is mobile optimized.
Thank you. So in between the social media and the age demographics, I was interested in just understanding, I guess, some of the context of, so between basically like the top 5 search terms, like is there a specific engine, or what, in what context are people searching for these terms?
They are using the terms visiting Juneau, just capital city. We have search engine optimization on our website too. So we plug in keywords that we want people to look for as well. And we know that they're searching on those particular terms. So Juneau, Southeast Alaska, Alaska, whale watching, all of those kinds of terms, and we have reports that show how often those terms are being used. Organically, folks are coming in through primarily Google with an organic site, so they just type in, hey, I'd like to visit Juneau, and we're coming in kind of at the top. That's where most people are coming in, but they're also getting referrals from Facebook and clicking through to the website from our various social channels as well. Anything else? Okay. So the visitor information services. All of our volunteers are Juneau residents. They undergo quite a bit of training. Want to remind this group that our annual travel fair and volunteer training will be April 20th this year at the Jack. Right now, while we have seen a little bit of a drop in the number of volunteers that we have on a regular basis, that core group has stayed steady over the last 2 to 3 years, and we are going to undergo a big recruitment campaign here starting in the next couple of weeks as we head into the season. The number of visitors that were served primarily at the 2 downtown centers represent approximately 10% of the total number of people who came into town. A reminder that we also have a walk-up counter at the airport. We staff that as often as we can and field those questions, and then we have a walk-up just information only with collaterals out at the ferry terminal. That is not staffed. Next slide. Oh, I thought I had partnership on there too. Just a word about our partnership. We are seeing a rebound in the number of paid partners that we have coming into the organization, and that will impact our ability to collect earned income and revenue from those partners as well. Highlights over the last couple, 12 or so months is we are actively working with the Aquaman Triathlon Board to help them increase the number of athletes. They intend to grow that event significantly over the next 2 to 3 years. So we're working with them to provide them some additional support to handle some of their logistics, including some professional timers and other things that they're going to need. They need new bike racks and a very number of things. So we're wanting to really shift our resources to assist locally grown events wherever that's appropriate for them to grow. Happy to announce that we worked with our partner at Alaska Brewing, and we're giving away a trip that was awarded in September, and the couple from Minnesota will visit us for 6 days in May. Our partners came through with lodging, they came through with all manner of excursions. We've got great things to give these people, and our intention is to lightly follow them around as they have their Juneau adventure and talk to them, get some video, and really show them the town. We took advantage of an offer from Nat Geo UK. We had 4 articles published this fall on hiking, food, Juneau as an Alaska Native Arts Center. Those, I think, are still live on the Nat Geo UK website if you'd like to go and take a look at that. We've been engaging with media, and we've been involved with a number of travel trade shows over the last 2 to 3 months. We've done about 5 shows in the last 3 months, and we've got 3 or 4 additional shows between now and the end of the fiscal. Mentioned travel fair. You also, I believe, have a document that has some of our longer-term goals and strategies. What we have found is that the industry changes so quickly that looking out more than about 3 years is not particularly useful. Between the changes in technology and other things that are playing a part in how travelers make their decisions, including economic pressures, we want to be nimble. However, we have laid out as an organization a number of things that we want to get done, not the least of which is significantly increase the number of fully independent travelers that we have coming into town. One of the things that we really need is some research to establish what our current benchmark is. And it's my understanding that we have some new technology available to us for like cell phone data and other pieces that would be cost-effective for us to use and to really establish that benchmark, so then we can set a percentage of how much we want to grow and see what that looks like. We also want to, we're going to update our website get new content up there. That's something that is ongoing. The other piece that you will see is that we will be using a whole lot more little rainy day images, misty images, snowy images of Juneau in an effort to really show people what Juneau is like. They see all these bluebird day pictures on all of their collaterals, and that's really not what we're all about. So pushing out the message that, the way Juneau's, work is we do practically everything in the rain that other people do in the sunshine, and roll those messages out. Another part of the plan is to focus on multiple day itineraries, rather than here's your day in Juneau. Have multiple day itineraries and include a number of excursions that take, half a day to do or take a whole day to do, and really focus in on those FIT visitors and people who are coming in either pre or post convention and want to spend some time and really immerse themselves in the community. Visitor experience is really important to us. We're going to be rolling out some messaging for our visitors to get them accustomed to what's actually happening on the ground in terms of transportation, getting them educated about what's happening, and try to manage those expectations ahead of their arrival into town. And finally, we are going to embark on a communications campaign to ensure that all the residents of Juneau know what Travel Juneau is. They know what TVMP is. And as you know, TVMP is a pass-through program for Travel Juneau. But we have found that there are a number of people, even though TVMP has been around for 2.5 decades, still don't know what it is. And what we really want to do is reach our younger audiences to let them know what it is and how they can participate when that seems to be the thing to do. I believe that is all I have for my presentation, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have. That's a high-level view of the information that you have in your packet. We're doing good work and keeping people happy as much as we can.
Who has questions for Ms. Perry? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Perry, for being here. I'm curious about if the board or the organization has had any discussion or engagement around short-term rentals. You probably know that that's one of our priorities this year as an assembly, to continue to look at number of short-term rentals in our community and potentially look at regulations. Obviously, that impacts visitors, but it also impacts our housing stock, which impacts the tourism industry as well. So I'm curious if Travel Juneau is engaging on that, thinking about engaging on that issue at all.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Ms. Perry.
Thank you, Assembly Member Wall, for the question. Yes, we have had discussions at the board level regarding STRs. Our position is that a limited number of STRs are needed because we run out of hotel rooms in summertime. We just don't have enough hotel stock. Without some STRs, VRBOs, people just wouldn't be able to get into town. So we recognize that that level of rental fills a niche that a lot of families want. You want to rent a house because you don't want to have to divide the family up into 5 different hotel rooms, any one of a number of reasons. They want to cook their own food. There's a lot of reasons to have that. We also recognize, from our operators that we have a critical housing crunch. So our operators are having trouble finding housing for their staff. It's a well-known fact that many operators have purchased sixplexes, all over town to try to find places for their seasonal staff. So this is a topic that we are, we're really, kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of it. But we want to support the work that CBJ is doing in reference to short-term rentals, because we see both sides of that dilemma. We need some, but how many do we need? I think that's the question. But we do lack hotel rooms in summertime.
Any further questions? Thank you for your time, and sorry it took so long to get to you. And between you and Ms. Fleck, their budget is in our budget, right? So nothing that we have to deal with.
Madam Mayor, that is correct. You will see Travel Juno's budget come through in a couple places. You may also be hearing from Ms. Perry to sponsor a community request for items above the base budget. But through the resolution on the hotel bed tax, we are treating Travel Juno as somewhat similar to a department and reviewing their budget through our normal manager's budget review process.
All right, thank you. Next item is passenger fees. And I saw Ms. Pierce walking up here, so Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In recognition of the late hour, I am going to assume that the Assembly has read my memo, and I will, and I'll make a few points and then take questions. So firstly, I know we have 2 new members. You're new to this process, so just so you know, assuming that you have not gone into the weedy details of the passenger fee ordinance, we are required by ordinance to solicit passenger fee recommendations from the public. Then we compile the budget. We then gain feedback at an Assembly committee meeting, usually this one, about this time of year. And then we put that back out for public comment. And then there's another budget discussion later in the budget process. I believe Ms. Wendell has that scheduled for about April 6th right now. So this is not the only time you're going to be seeing this. The idea is that we get an initial reaction from the Assembly before putting this out for public review. So with that, this year's passenger fee proposal, as always, we have enhanced municipal services that is calculated in the same way every year based on a formula that was established as part of our settlement agreement with a third-party consulting firm. And then we do third-party services by Assembly grant. That is things like Travel Juno's Visitor Services Program, the Crossing Guard Program, et cetera. Little shout out to the Visitor Services Program. I know Liz is looking for volunteers. I have a few seniors in my life who absolutely love working at the Visitor Information Center. So if you have retirees that need a little bit of extra stimulation and interaction, it's a fantastic program that she runs. We also, you will see more money for TBMP this year. Ms. Perry made reference to that. We're trying to bolster the program and kind of modernize it. You know, we established it back in 1997, Kirby, and I think, and it hasn't really changed since then, and the way we communicate really has. And then the one thing that I want to draw the Assembly's attention to is the DBA Downtown Ambassador Program. So I had asked for some metrics associated with that program. And I think my question was misinterpreted a little bit by the DBA board. I had wanted, you know, are passenger fees paying to print maps? I know you advertise on these maps, Travel Juno doesn't. How much are you paying these people? What's the overhead? How does this all work financially? And I got metrics that were kind of number of maps distributed and things like that. So I do not yet have that information from DBA, and that's something that I feel like I need before I can make a recommendation to this body. It's in there for now. It's something that we funded in the past. It's something that we funded for many years, but the amount increased pretty significantly last year, and I have some questions. And then the JEDC mobile data purchase, this is cell phone data, so we can kind of see where visitors are going and what areas they're using. This is something we can use to inform our commercial rec use study. I have told JEDC that I'm comfortable with this line item as long as it's shareable with other entities, whether Ms. Perry wants it, whether a consultant that we hire for something else needs access to that data. I'm not comfortable with it just being a JEDC thing. I think it can be a valuable asset for the community. And if they want to be keepers and stewards of that, that's okay. But it should probably be something that's widely available to others. And we have, for the last few years, provided restroom and security funding to the 2 private docks. And at the same rate that we provide our own docks. This is consistent in this budget. Capital investments, I go through in my memo. I will just let the assembly ask me questions about that. I do not yet have an estimate for the Overstreet Park canoe sculpture lighting, but that will hopefully be in the package that we put out to the public. If not, we'll update it once we have that information. I know Mr. Bohan is actively working on it. So with that, I am happy to field any questions.
Who has questions for Ms. Pierce? Mr. Smith, and Ms. Atkinson, and Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Pierce, I just wanted to start off by saying I really appreciate you listing all these different requests and things. That's a nice, it's just a nice way to show people that you have received the request and you included the information, and then we have the information to make decisions, but it's really helpful to see. So thank you for doing that. I had a question on the public Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I guess anyway, I've heard about the issue. I heard people, saying they can't connect downtown or can't even, run whatever, their little credit card swiping machines due to the thing. I'm just curious how this helps that. Yeah.
Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and through the mayor. So I brought this issue to our MIS department. They did a great deal of research on the best way to solve this problem, and they came up with this public Wi-Fi scheme, which, from what I understand as an extremely non-technical person, is that there is a way to kind of capture visitor traffic and have like a Wi-Fi pop-up. I think it's probably appropriate to get some more information, a memo kind of explaining the service from MIS for our further discussion in April.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you. I actually had a question about the downtown bear-proof garbage cans. What is wrong with our garbage cans so much that we need $100,000 to fix it?
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson, and through the mayor. So this was a request that came from a member of the public, and I reached out to the Parks and Rec director and said, are our downtown bear-proof garbage cans actually in disrepair? And do they need replacement? And the answer I received was yes. So I included them in the budget with departmental support.
Any follow-up there, Ms. Atkinson? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll echo Mr. Smith's comments. It's about how fun it is to read these, so thanks for putting it together. I feel like every year there's like a new seasoned assembly member who starts to get cranky about the fact that there is still private dock funding on this list, and maybe you could speak to why that is still here.
Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Ms. Wall, and through the mayor. I am actively working on an agreement with the private docks that would kind of settle the funding discussion once and for all. I would have loved to have that in front of you tonight, but with all things related to tourism and dealing with large multinational companies, it moves a little slower than I would like it to. That said, the restrooms and security funding is something that we decided a number of years ago were public needs that were being filled at the private docks, and was a bit of a compromise. However, with this agreement, which hopefully I'll have in front of you in the relatively near future, I would like to have a much more complete and nuanced conversation with the Assembly about passenger fees and private docks.
Thank you. I have Ms. Hale, Ms. Hughes, Scannies, and then I'll throw myself in.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Pierce, you may have said this earlier and I may have missed it because it's been a long meeting, but how do you winnow the requests down to what goes on this list? Because we have some things that are requested that aren't on this list.
Thank you, Ms. Hale, and through the mayor. I think it's similar to any of the departmental budgeting processes. You know, you have an amount of money and a list of needs. I do meet with the city manager, deputy city manager, finance director, and other key staff on what to fund. In terms of CBJ requests, that's kind of a collaborative internal discussion. In terms of public requests, we kind of evaluate them against the settlement agreement first and foremost, and the feasibility of being able to complete the request, and you know, like in the case of the bear-proof garbage cans, for example, whether or not the department responsible considers it a need. Another great example, something we're funding, is the canoe lighting on Overstreet Park, which was recommended by the artist, and I think that's great. It's a beautiful statue or sculpture, and if we can do something to enhance a piece of our public art, and it's probably not going to cost that much money, then we probably should. So I would just say that it's similar to any other city budget discussion, with two opportunities, extra opportunities for public input and then comment.
Thank you. I'll just point out that canoe was part of the COVID art funding, so very happy about that. But my follow-up is actually if as we read through this packet and we disagree with some of your funding recommendations, at what point will we be able to make those changes?
Go ahead, Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, and through the mayor, you are welcome to make that recommendation tonight, or you can make it in April when we discuss the budget.
Okay, Ms. Hughes, Scannies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Ms. Wall referenced the people who are cranktastic about the private docks, and when no one else is doing it, it's me. Because I consistently have issues with this. And I remember in my tenure, when we had more people cranky about it, and I remember Ms. Gladaszewski, and it was a closer sort of feeling, or it wasn't obvious which way it would go. And at the time, it was those new security fees, and now those have been here forever, and we continue to do it. But don't worry, there's a question coming. And don't worry, guys, I will be like this during April, because I am going to try again to get them out of here. But you talked about negotiating, and you mentioned that, but we didn't have time to ask you questions at our last lands, or when you, sorry that you're so frequently waiting until the end of the night to get to talk to us, and we appreciate your patience. But I understand with multinational flagged cruise ships, the pain and teeth pulling of negotiations. But here we have two private dock owners. And I'm just wondering, when you're talking about negotiation processes and slower than you would hope, and my last understanding was we were doing a rate study. We have our dock, they have their docks. We might change the rates at our docks. We give them money because we think that that's a public good. how are we now in this like very slow negotiation process with two private dock owners? Because I don't recall when we switched approaches to that.
Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, through the mayor. So we are discussing things like the best ship at best dock concept. So at the private docks, we have long-term lease agreements that are like 5 years. And so when we say something like, I don't like that ship there, I want it to move, they say, no, we have a lease. We charge 3 times as much as you, and we don't want to lose money. And that's, you know, Mr. Days in the room, and that's unfair, and that's a bit flippant. But I will say that it is a bit more complicated. And one of the things that is a big goal of mine is that once we've installed shore power at our city docks, we have the ships that are at our docks for the longest, or that are in port for the longest, plugged into shore power, whether they're plugged in at the Franklin dock, whether they're plugged in at the steamship dock. And so that takes changes to the way that the dock agreements are structured today. On top of that, we did a rate study. I would like to raise rates more to be more competitive with the private docks. And we also and I'm trying to figure out how to say this carefully, may or may not be having discussions in the future about an additional private dock. And when we're having discussions about an additional private dock, I would like to have a set of constraints around what private dock operation in Juneau looks like that we can then apply and present to that proponent in a way that helps our port manage as function as a kind of a cohesive unit as we contemplate being a minority in dock ownership within our own port. So there's a number of factors there, and I think one of the things that would be helpful in an agreement where we're able to raise rates is to allow docks and harbors to actually operate like a true enterprise fund so that they have the money to be able to do some of the projects that they ask for in their passenger fee budget, and are able to kind of function in the way that they were designed to function, but they don't have the funds to do so currently. So, while not fixing or price setting or anything that violates antitrust laws, having a competitive rate structure across the port, I think, benefits everybody and allows us to create some more flexible agreements around moving ships to maximize time on shore power.
I appreciate that philosophical approach. We can chat more about it. Thank you, Ms. Pierce.
Sounds great. And if I may, because it's late and because I know we're rushing through this, if any of the assembly want to have a more detailed conversation about passenger fee budget or the philosophical approach behind any of this and ahead of April, my door's open.
I'm going to follow up on Ms. Hughes-Gandy's question, but it's not my question, so I can ask a question too. I hope during your negotiations that a part of it is we don't give you money unless you don't hot berth.
Absolutely, that is like the first point in the agreement, and thank you for bringing it up because I forgot to mention it at this late hour.
Perfect. I'm glad you talked about the Downtown Business Association's ambassador and the JEDC mobile data purchase. So my first question on the Downtown Business Association. I'm concerned with so when you bring information back to us, I'm concerned with their administration fee. It's a little bit high. And I'm also concerned that they're handing out maps that have advertising. And I want to make sure that this doesn't go to the printing of the maps because we already pay Travel Gino to print maps. So it seems weird for us to use funds to print maps with advertising on it. Any questions, other questions? Okay, then I gotta keep going. And then on the JEDC mobile data purchase, Travel General mentioned they could use that information, so I'm not sure why that's going to JEDC and not Travel General, so if we can follow up with that, that would be a good question. And then my last question is the revolving loan fund. And this is the low interest loan for tourism operators to invest in cleaner energy equipment. I'm wondering if we could also, I don't know if there's technology there to make the helicopters quieter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish there was quiet helicopter technology. If quiet helicopter technology is something that happens in the future, I would hope that that we're able to structure the language around the loan so that we can use it for that. And on the Travel Juno versus JEDC thing, JEDC asked, and I'm happy to sort that out in between now and April.
All right, that sounds perfect. Mr. Smith?
Thank you. And it is getting late, but is there any reasonable argument that we could use these passenger fees for the first responder radio system in any way? And we can take it offline, you know.
Yeah, why don't we take that one offline, so we don't have to have it.
I just wanted to get my great idea on the record.
I was just gonna, that brings me to my thing. I was just gonna say, because of the time we've taken Mr. Palmer's section out of it, and so if you have questions on how to use any of these funds, please see Mr. Palmer at a later date that's not after 9 o'clock at night. We would appreciate that. So Ms. Pierce, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have to do anything with it tonight. It's just information only. We'll see it again in April during our budget cycle.
Unless anybody has any burning requests for changes.
I don't see any burning requests for changes other than Ms. Hughes Candies, who needs to work on her amendments and come back with them. So with that, we will go back to our agenda. Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Job well done as always. And our next meeting date is March 6th. And but I believe our next meeting is February 12th. Is that correct? That's your meeting, right? No, good. Anything else before the finance committee tonight? The finance director says no, so we can run. We're adjourned.
Night, guys.